Chapter 903. Arbor reached out to cover her face. When she turned back to see him following her with a smile, she couldn't help but glare at him. This person had a strange charm all over him, like a magnet that always attracted other people's eyes. He was especially annoying. Mo Lien didn't care that the little fellow was scowling at him. He was secretly amused as he reached out to take her little hand and pulled her towards the Supreme Court's entrance. "We've been to the Supreme Court's prison twice already. I'm familiar with the place, so I won't go down with you, okay?" Arbor nodded, using her eyes to indicate for him to let go. "You're not going down with me, so why do you keep holding my hand? You're obstructing other people's movements." Mo Lien looked at her innocently. "I'll send you to the entrance." The Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor had already heard the news and ran out to receive them. It was the nearly 40-year-old official that they saw last time. Beside him was a naturally supercilious official. When he saw the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, he also came over to greet them with a smile. Mo Lien said in a low voice, "This is Official Go." Mo Lien secretly gave Arbor a look, and transmitted a voice into her ear. "He's the one who barged into Second Imperial Brothers Fu to capture Ding Ting Ding." Arbor was enlightened. She glanced at Official Gu, but didn't say much to him. She followed the Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor to the prison. Along the way, the Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor politely exchanged greetings with Arbor. The capital's Qiao family are all locked up in the prison in the north. Qiao Dongbua and the others are all locked up separately. I don't know which one the Crown Princess wants to see. I don't want to see Qiao Dongbua. Arbor pursed her lips. Take me to the prison cells where the Qiao family's commoners are locked up. Yes. The Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor called over a jailer to lead the way, and he brought Arbor to the largest prison cells in the north. There were 40 to 50 people locked up in each cell. It was a dark mass as far as the eye could see. Seeing that someone was coming over, those people were like dying quails. They couldn't help but cry out, "Let me out," one after another. Scram, scram, scram. The jailer swung his whip and flung back the hands that had broken out of the wooden cell. Arbor passed by and searched for sixth Uncle Chow's family of 3 in the cell. All of a sudden, a person pushed his way to the front of the wooden cage and slammed his head into the cage. He clung onto the wooden pillar and shouted at her, "Arbor! How dare you come to Arbor? You bitch, you caused us to be in this state, and you still dare to come and see us. You black-hearted, venomous woman, why don't you just die?" A whip struck her hand, and in return, she let out a wail of pain. Arbor turned his head and looked at Joni coldly, a mocking smile on his face. Miss Chow definitely didn't know that she would live such a miserable life. Arbor tossed her howls and clamors to the back of his mind and strolled past her. He found sixth Uncle Chow's family of 3 in the third large prison cell. Chow Mu beckoned at the jailer, having him open the cell door. Instantly, many people attempted to charge out. When the jailer saw this, he effortlessly lashed them back with a few whips. "All of you, behave yourselves. You will be exiled to the northwestern desert tomorrow. There's no need to be so anxious. There will always be a chance to let you out." The jailer's gloating words elicited howls and screams from the Chow family. They had been living and working in peace and contentment in the Mo Kingdom capital these past few years, and they were used to living like princes. How could they possibly adapt to the bitter cold of the northwestern desert? Chapter 904. Arbor, Arbor. A thin, dark-skinned woman screamed as she rushed to the door, but she was whipped back twice by the jailer. Her eyes were red as she glared at Arbor from across the wooden pillars. "Arbor! Do you still have a conscience? Do you still have the slightest bit of kinship? Don't you think it's enough that you've caused us to be like this? You actually want to send us to the Northwest Desert? You. Arbor stared icily at the dark-skinned woman from across the cage. This person was her youngest aunt, Su Jiao, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. The current her was even more tanned and skinny than the last time they met, and her chin had already sunken in. Su Jiao looked at Arbor in this state and suddenly prostrated herself on the ground, kowtowing in exhaustion. She sobbed uncontrollably, looking remorseful and heartbroken. Arbor, eldest niece. Just forgive uncle, auntie, and your cousin. Let us out. Don't send us to the Northwest Army. Whoa, that really isn't a place where people can stay. Jojo, take it as second aunt's fault in the past. Second aunt has let you down. If you want to blame or resent me, it's up to you. Please, for the sake of our family, for the sake of your father and mother, let us live. That's right. Jojo, give us a way out. Qiao Zhongheng was truly scared at this time. He originally thought that he could live a good life after being brought back to the Qiao family by Qiao Dongbue, but he didn't expect Qiao Dongbue to be a hypocrite. He found a residence to settle them down, and their family was still starving like before. It was just that the place they lived in was better than the rundown temple, and the decorations in the house were also exquisite. But what was the use of these? They couldn't eat or drink. They only looked good on the surface, but in reality, they were still in a state where they were about to go crazy from hunger every day. Moreover, this time, they didn't do anything. They were completely tricked by Qiao Dongbue and were dragged into prison because of him. They weren't willing to be sent to the Northwest Army like this, so no matter how uncomfortable Su Jiao was, she had no choice but to yield and lower her head at this moment. However, it was as if a fire had ignited in her heart, burning fiercely. She felt that the anger in her heart was about to engulf her. Since when did the people of the first branch become so high and mighty, so high that they couldn't climb up to them? Wei Ziqin, whom she had always looked down on, actually didn't hesitate to use her as an excuse to beg for mercy from the person she had looked down on the most in order to survive. Su Jiao thought with a sour taste in her heart. She raised her head and looked impatiently at this niece, looking like she was begging for her forgiveness. Arbor gazed into Su Jiao's eyes as if he had walked through the long river of history. His long and distant gaze rippled as if it had passed through a century. That pitch-black gaze without the slightest ripple caused Su Jiao's heart to become unsettled. Su Jiao felt that her niece's eyes, which were as cold as a dry well, were a bit frightening. It seemed that ever since this niece was 7 years old, she had accidentally rolled down the hill from the academy. After she woke up from her coma, Su Jiao's life started to deteriorate day by day. Su Jiao was quite unwilling, but now, she had no choice but to admit that this niece's current status was something that she probably wouldn't be able to catch up to in this lifetime. Perhaps only by begging for mercy could she obtain a chance of survival. Arbor glanced coldly at Su Jiao. He took out a pouch of money from his sleeve and threw it at Su Jiao's feet. Su Jiao only felt her heart sink with a thump. Chapter 905. At this time, Qiao Zhongheng cowardly shrunk behind his wife, and Qiao Long didn't even dare to let out a fart. Su Jiao gritted her teeth and trembled as she bent down to pick up that money pouch. When she reached out to open the pouch, her eyes immediately bulged when she saw the piece of silver in the pouch. 20 taels. A string seemed to have been plucked in Su Jiao's head, and her entire brain suddenly exploded. Arbor curled his lips, but there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile in his pitch-black eyes as he stared at Su Jiao and said, "Young aunt, back then, if you had even the slightest bit of..." Arbor made a gesture with his pinky. "Conscience. Then you wouldn't have been so heartless as to conspire with Wu Yanjun to sell my younger sister to the Dou family." Su Jiao's entire body trembled uncontrollably, and her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked up at Arbor. How did you know it was 20 taels? No more, no less. The commission she received was exactly 20 taels, so how did this child Arbor know? That was 8 years ago. Even this old woman didn't know. Arbor was just a 7-year-old child, so how did she know? Arbor coldly swept a glance at Su Jiao as he approached that prison cell step by step. He softly said to her, "Did you know? That young master of the Dou family is a pervert. If you guys really conspired to send my younger sister to that hell on earth, do you think she'll live past 12 years old?" Su Jiao's entire body trembled. Looking at Arbor's nearly morbid expression, she shrieked in fright, "Don't come over." Arbor halted his steps and coldly gazed at this woman. 20 taels to buy the lives of your family of 3. Keep the change. Old 6th Qiao and 6th Aunt Qiao both looked up at this time and narrowed their eyes as they glanced at Arbor. They didn't seem to have expected that she would be so ruthless as to abandon her own uncle and aunt. Xiaoya, on the other hand, followed behind her parents. Her pair of cold eyes contained a faint light of confusion as she looked at her just like that. Arbor, Arbor. Su Jiao was thoroughly flustered. She tightly gripped the money pouch in her hands as she cried, threw a tantrum, and regretted her past actions. Jojo, Jojo, Auntie knows her mistake. Auntie really knows her mistake. Can you give me another chance? Or maybe you should give your cousin a chance. Your cousin was just a child 8 years ago. He didn't know anything. He's innocent. Jojo, Jojo, I beg you, don't be so cruel. Innocent. Xiao Mu sneered as she turned around to look at her deeply. If he hadn't been reborn, his sister Jolin would have died next year. At that time, who would give Jolin another chance? Who could pity Jolin? Who could sympathize with her, a person who had lost her mother, her younger sister, and her younger brother? Who could sympathize with her? Her future would be so bleak. Don't blame her for being ruthless. It was an era where either you die or I die. It was better for you to die. Xiaoya and her parents followed behind Arbor and walked out of the prison cell under other people's envious gazes. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. When she walked into the sunlight, she saw that person turn around and smile foolishly at her. Her ice-cold heart seemed to have been melted by something as it slightly smoothed out. Xiao Mut sprinted towards Mo Lien and ran headfirst into his embrace. Prince Mo was bursting with joy when he saw that face begging for a hug. Chapter 906. His little fellow had taken the initiative to ask for a hug. It was such a good thing, so of course, he had to firmly grasp it and hug her tightly without letting go. Xiaoya was startled, and her expression was somewhat dazed as she looked at the two people hugging in front of her. Her emotions flashed quickly, and then she lowered her head again without saying a word. Xiaoya. 6th Aunt Xiao secretly said to her daughter, "It's all thanks to Jojo, oh, no, Crown Princess, that we were able to come out this time. It's all thanks to the Crown Princess' benevolence." Don't have that expression, relax. 6th Aunt Xiao was afraid that her daughter would offend Arbor, so she hurriedly warned her daughter in a low voice. Xiaoya's expression became more stiff, even a little unnatural, and her head stiffly turned away. Mo Lien calmed the little fellow's emotions and asked softly, "What's wrong? Did the Qiao family say something unpleasant?" Arbor shook his head. "Who cares what they said? It's fine, I just suddenly wanted to hug you." After saying that, the little fellow even reached out to tease a certain person's face. Prince Mo was stunned, and a layer of red quietly crept onto his ears. He hugged Arbor and muttered softly, "You can hug me whenever you want. You can hug me for as long as you want. It's best if you don't let go." "You're dreaming," Arbor muttered softly and reached out to push him. "Let's go." Mo Lien raised her hand to touch her own face. It was indeed a beautiful face. In order to reassure his mother, Arbor specially arranged for sixth Uncle Chiao and his family to live in a small residence on Shiluo Street. The residence had 2 entrances and was of moderate size. It was more than enough for 3 people to live in. Sixth Aunt Chiao tried to get close to her along the way, but she kept calling her Crown Princess instead of the usual Jojo, and the conversation was awkward everywhere. In addition, the Crown Prince, this great Buddha, was present. Sixth Aunt Chiao and sixth Uncle Chiao were so uneasy that they didn't know where to put their hands and feet. They occasionally spoke along the way, but it was quite awkward. Later, they simply stopped talking. When they arrived at the boundary of Shiluo Street, the carriage stopped at the intersection. There were tents all around, so the passage wasn't very smooth. It would be faster to walk. Mo Lien held Arbor's hand and led Xiao Laolu and his family to the entrance of the small house. Xiao Ye had been silent all this while. At this moment, she raised her head and quickly scanned the house. Something flashed through her eyes and quickly disappeared. From now on, you can stay here. Xiao Mu glanced at Xiao Ye, who had her head lowered, before turning to say to sixth Aunt Xiao, this small residence is basically complete, so you don't need to add anything else. You can directly move in. Yes, thank you, Crown Princess. Thank you. Xiao Lu's aunt hurriedly bowed and expressed her gratitude. Arbor felt a little uncomfortable seeing her being so polite. He sighed softly and said, if there's nothing else, the Crown Prince and I will take our leave first. Xiao Ye swiftly tugged at her mother's sleeve. Sixth Aunt Xiao froze for a moment before hastily saying with an obsequious smile, Crown Princess, how much food is in this residence? How long will it last our family of 3? Arbor was slightly taken aback and casually said, it shouldn't be a problem to eat the food until the Lantern Festival. Sister Xiaoya is also a mystic cultivator, so she can go to the city plaza to accept missions to earn mystic currency. When the time comes, she can use the mystic currency to buy food at the food hall. Oh, sixth Uncle Chiao and sixth Aunt Chiao answered obsequiously before sending Arbor and the Crown Prince out the door. The end of the 7th chapter. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 907. After leaving old sixth Chiao's home, Arbor felt rather fed up and didn't really want to talk after boarding the carriage. Mo Lien sat next to her and reached out to rub her small face. Why are you spacing out? It's enough after doing this. Everyone has their own lives. Let them be. You're upset because of some random people. I'm not happy to see that. When our family was in dire straits in the past, sixth Uncle Chiao's family would occasionally send some food over to help us out. Arbor sighed and said, I know what Mother is thinking. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring, that's right. We should repay sixth Uncle's kindness. Logically speaking, with our current family circumstances, it shouldn't be a big problem to help if we can. But I keep feeling that. My heart doesn't feel too good. Arbor turned to look at Mo Lien and grabbed his large palm. Did you see sixth Aunt's appearance just now? She didn't treat me as a junior at all. She was too courteous and made me feel uncomfortable all over. No, to be precise, it was a hint of flattery, which was too unbearable to look at. In reality, she would rather be like before. However, sixth Uncle's family, which used to be simple and unadorned, seemed to have completely vanished into thin air in the torrent of time. I know that the human heart is the most fickle thing, Arbor said aloofly. It was me who didn't know how to be flexible and worried about nothing. You're babbling nonsense. Mo Lien pulled her into his arms and stared at her intently. The human heart is fickle. It's referring to those who sail according to the wind and have unstable minds. I won't change. My feelings for you can be proven by the river of time. Mo Lien lowered his head and kissed her small cheek. Seeing some melancholy in her expression, he couldn't resist adding, "There are plenty of strong-willed people in this world. Take that guy Duan Yu for example. Although he looks especially unreliable, his thoughts and willpower aren't something that anyone can change." Arbor's mouth twitched. She looked up at that man and couldn't resist laughing. "Are you praising him or insulting him? Scoundrel, always bad-mouthing Duan Yu behind his back." Of course, it was damage. Mo Lien pursed her lips. "I heard that he invited you to the Lantern Festival." Arbor tilted his head and looked at him with a half-smile. "Are you not coming?" "Of course I'm coming." In Xiao Mu's opinion, boys were really quite noisy. When things were good, they were so close that they could wear the same pair of pants. When things were bad, they would kill each other anytime and anywhere. When she thought of the Lantern Festival, she would have to drag the three little radish heads along with the two boys who would fight each other from time to time. Her heart was shrouded in a faint trace of sadness. My Joe's section break. The Marquis of Su An's estate was located rather far from Minshan Avenue. Compared to the bustling Minshan Avenue, the Marquis of Su An's estate was rather remote. Ever since the fourth princess forced Hu family's old third, the Prince Consort, to death, the Marquis of Su An's residence became more and more destitute. Now, even the lintel of the door was peeling off. Only half of the word "and" was left. When the estate's maidservant passed through the sparse corridor, she cowered to the side when she encountered Hu Yukong. Unexpectedly, young master Hu didn't even look at her and walked away with his hands behind his back. It looked like he was returning to his own courtyard. He actually didn't come up to touch her. The maidservant dazedly stared at young master Hu's back. Could it be that red rain was going to fall from the sky? She looked up at the sky. Chapter 908. Creak. Hu Yukong casually kicked open the door to his own courtyard. Looking at the swaying and broken door, he clicked his tongue and shook his head, a trace of disdain flashing through his eyes. What Marquis' estate? With this kind of wealth, it was simply laughable. Hu Yukong walked straight into his room, closed the door, and walked in front of 100 treasure grid. There was no need to mention the shabby appearance of this 100 treasure grid. On top of it was a leaping horse with paint peeling off, as well as a few cheap jade pendants. Hu Yukong turned a button on the lowest level of the 100 treasure grid. With a whoosh, the 100 treasure grid moved to the left, revealing a small secret room behind it. Hu Yukong continued to click his tongue. Not to mention how crude this mechanism was, just this fucking impoverished Marquis' estate, which didn't even have a billionth of his treasures, still gave him a shitty secret room. In the beginning, he was so excited that he wanted to die. He thought that this guy had really hidden some good stuff, but in the end, there was only a broken copper cauldron, 2 chests of gold ingots, and a few bags of rations. Whoa. In the center of the small secret room, a man and woman were tied to a stool, back to back. They looked in horror at the Hu Yukong, who walked in. Their mouths were gagged with a rag, so they could only make muffled sounds. Their expressions were also somewhat twisted. Woo what? Hu Yukong suddenly stepped forward and kicked the leg of the man on the stool. If I didn't see that your place is clean, do you think I would like to stay in your broken place? It's just borrowing a place. Look at how stingy you are. Hu Yukong kicked him 2 more times, then suddenly smiled maliciously. The person tied to the stool was Hu Yukong himself. Speaking of his bad luck, didn't it start from that day in Spring Dawn Garden? After returning from Spring Dawn Garden after being smashed in the head by a fierce woman, Hu Yukong found someone to treat him. After that, he felt that it was difficult to get rid of the gloominess in his chest. That night, he grabbed a young servant girl to relieve his stuffiness. Who knew that halfway through the good deed, the back of his head would be ruthlessly smashed by someone? His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. When he woke up, he was tied up in this secret room along with the average-looking servant girl. And the most terrifying thing was that this woman, who was so enchanting and beautiful that a single glance from her could seduce people to death, actually turned into a living person in front of him. In the blink of an eye, she turned into Hu Yukong's appearance. It was simply too horrifying. A woman suddenly turned into a man. It wasn't a disguise, but a real transformation of his body. Even his Adam's apple could be seen clearly. This was really too frightening. Especially at that moment, when he saw Hu Yukong smiling at him with his identical face. The real Hu Yukong felt as if he was about to suffocate. "You good for nothing, look at how scared you are." Hu Yukong used an unprepossessing man's face to smile like a flirtatious woman. The real Hu Yukong was so scared that his eyes rolled back and he almost fainted on the spot. He never knew that he could smile so horribly. The illusion of looking at himself in the mirror made him shudder. "Hey, I won't tease you anymore." The Hu Yukong, in front of him, who had an ordinary face, slowly turned into a beautiful woman with pink lips and enchanting eyebrows as the bones in her body cracked. Her voice also changed from a man's voice to a soft female voice. Chapter 909. Once again, he saw the snake beauty successfully transform from Hu Yukong into a beautiful woman. Her entire face, height, figure, and fat had all undergone a terrifying transformation. Greatly agitated, Hu Yukong's eyes rolled back as he finally fainted. Meanwhile, the young maidservant tied together with Hu Yukong was also slightly agape. Because of fear and dread, her entire body trembled incessantly, and cold sweat rolled down her forehead as if she had just been fished out of a river. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The snake beauty sighed and swayed her snake-like waist as she walked up to the young maidservant. The snake beauty slightly lowered her waist, and her face was practically pressed against the young maidservant's face. Her fragrant breath blew past the young maidservant's face. "Don't be afraid, don't worry, I'm a good person." The young maidservant widened her eyes in horror, and her brain seemed to have lost the ability to speak due to the agitation. She could only nod while trembling. The snake beauty giggled and walked to the table on the side without consulting anyone. She then rolled up her sleeves and started to grind ink and lay out paper. "If it weren't for the fact that this Hu Yukong is so useless, why would I come back now?" Sigh, she had finally managed to sneak into the Qiao residence, but in the end, the number of times she had seen this little fiend could be counted on one hand. Moreover, she would stare at her with extreme vigilance every time. She really didn't know where she had exposed herself. They clearly had different faces, so how could she see through the clues every time? Ever since she had failed to find her in Bailon City, she could only return to the Mo Kingdom capital to look for her. Unfortunately, it was difficult to get close to her even after finding her. How vexing. Holding the ink brush, the snake beauty pondered for a while with her chin propped up. Then, with a slight smile, she suddenly lowered her head and started scribbling. After she finished writing, she picked up the entire piece of paper and pouted her small mouth to blow at the ink that hadn't dried yet. A poppy smile spread across her beautiful small face. Squeak, squeak, squeak dot squeak, squeak, squeak dot. In the Mo Kingdom capital Central Plaza, there was an extremely large and long mission board constructed from lapis lazuli. All kinds of missions were posted on it for people to choose from. Many special operations teams would come here every few days to take on a mission in order to maintain their daily necessities. On this day, as usual, there were people coming and going in the city's central plaza. There were too many to count of those who were accepting and handing in missions. When teams that were familiar with each other met, they would politely greet each other and ask each other questions. It was almost noon today, and there were quite a few team members gathered in front of the mission panel. Just like before, they were searching for the mission they wanted to take on according to the various mission lists. Then, everyone's eyes fell on a piece of crimson paper that was stained with ink and had a few words written in flamboyant calligraphy. That wasn't an ordinary mission announcement, but make way, please make way. The vice captain of the giant bear squad, Hannah Mushroom, moved her large body and squeezed into the crowd. Why are you all in a daze in front of the panel? Hurry up and leave after taking the mission slip. All of you are standing here. Hey, look, are my eyes playing tricks on me? You're not seeing things. This is a visit at the Spring Lantern Festival. He must take away the Northern Prince Mo's favorite. Notice is hereby given. Signed by Ding Ting Ding. Hua Gu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she shouted, "Holy shit! Am I seeing things?" Ding Ting Ding has issued a challenge to His Highness the Crown Prince. Ding Ting Ding. What Ding Ting Ding? Is it that Ding Ting Ding? Which Ding Ting Ding is there in this world? Fuck, Ding Ting Ding has gone overboard this time. Wait. Chapter 9-10. Wow, Ding Ting Ding is going against His Highness the Crown Prince this time. How can this be the same as those people in the past? Oh my god. I'll bet with you that Ding Ting Ding's plan to steal this time will definitely fail. What kind of person is His Highness? He won't let that bastard get away with it. The crowd was in a frenzy as they discussed the matter. Loud noises could be heard everywhere. Guess what treasure His Highness the Crown Prince treasures? Could it be some kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique or something like that? Or some kind of miraculous elixir? Holy shit, Ding Ting Ding can't be coveting His Highness's vast territory, right? Out of the way, out of the way. Everyone, disperse and make way for His Highness. Everyone, out of the way. Don't crowd this place. 2 rows of guards ran over and pushed the crowd to the sides. That lapis lazuli panel was revealed from the bustling crowd. A tall, ink-colored figure slowly approached the lapis lazuli panel. He coldly stared at the piece of red paper fluttering in the wind. He raised his right hand slightly and suddenly clenched his 5 fingers. That piece of red paper flew into his hand with a whoosh. The man's eyes lowered as he coldly stared at the piece of red paper in his hand. No one knew this better than he did. Whatever heaven-defying cultivation technique, miraculous elixir, or even the vast territory, none of them were his treasures. Ding Ting Ding, that damned bastard, actually wanted to extend his demonic claws to his treasure. He wanted to kill this guy with his own hands. Mo Lian's eyes were cold as he tightly clenched the piece of red paper in his hand. When he opened his hand again, the paper had already turned into nothingness and scattered with the wind. Over 1,000 people had gathered in the city's central plaza, but no one dared to speak. His Highness's deterrence was truly a bit terrifying. Everyone could tell that the man was in a very bad mood right now. Who still dared to provoke His Highness at this juncture? It wasn't like they were tired of living. Although no one dared to say it out loud, they were still rather curious. They were even looking forward to the arrival of the Lantern Festival. Ding Ting Ding had been undefeated for many years and was known as the thief sage Ding Ting Ding. They really didn't know if he would fail to steal His Highness's item this time. If he failed, that would break his record of 0 defeats. Several days later, in the estate of the Marquis of Jiayuan. When Arbor heard the report that the goods from Southern Bailey had arrived, she guessed that it must be her batch of ebony. When he ran out to take a look, he saw that the entire manor was surrounded by the children of the Hidden Night Pavilion, leaving not even a drop of water to trickle through. There were more than 30,000 pieces of ebony delivered. Arbor was in a good mood. For the time being, she planned to throw this batch of ebony into her inner world. However, she wouldn't foolishly put it away at the front door. It was better to let someone drag it into the house first. She didn't want anyone to suspect why her inner world was so big. After the things were moved into his courtyard, Arbor asked Xiao Yao, who was beside him, "Xiao Yao, do you feel that there are a lot more people around me these days? Why do I feel like this court is being surrounded by people from all directions?" Xiao Yao's mouth twitched. "Miss, Ding Ting Ding has already challenged His Highness to a battle. How can His Highness not be nervous?" "Oh, he's here to steal from him." Arbor nodded. "Stealing from him isn't stealing from me. Why did he get so many people to surround me?" "Miss, Ding Ting Ding wants to steal His Highness's most beloved. Isn't that you?" Chapter 9:11. Arbor turned to look at Xiao Yao in astonishment. "It can't be." "What can't be?" Xiao Yao was about to be defeated by her little master. "I'm a living person. Doesn't he only steal things? Why would he steal from me?" Arbor stared blankly for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "Doesn't he have to provide food for me even if he steals from me? That's not a loss." Xiao Yao didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. "My dear master. That Ding Ting Ding is clearly here to provoke His Highness. Do you think he lacks that bit of food from you?" Mo Lian had been so busy these past 2 days that she didn't come over. Who knew if she was secretly investigating Ding Ting Ding's whereabouts? Arbor was in a rather good mood after cleaning up her ebony pieces. She turned to Xiao Yao and said, "Xiao Yao, let's add more dishes tonight." Xiao Yao didn't make much of a fuss when she heard about adding more dishes this time. She looked at her worried expression with a bitter expression. "What's wrong? You're not even happy about adding more dishes." Arbor went up to grab her little hand and said, let's go. Come with me to the kitchen to take a look and see what dishes we should add. Do you want to drink chicken soup?" "Miss, why aren't you worried at all?" It turned out that when Miss received the news a few days ago, she was still in a daze and didn't know that Ding Ting Ding's target this time was her. No wonder she had been so carefree these past few days. "What am I worried about?" Arbor snorted disdainfully. "If he dares to come, I'll kill him while I'm at it. Then everything will be fine." Xiao Yao turned her head and saw that her Miss's expression was especially serious and didn't look like she was joking. She couldn't help but burst out laughing. "That's right. My Miss is so powerful. How could she be captured by that brat successfully? Let's go." Arbor pointed in the direction of the kitchen and dragged Xiao Yao away. "Xiao Yao, do you want to ask Mo Lian to withdraw some men? I heard that my father went out for a walk yesterday and almost couldn't enter the house when he came home." Xiao Yao hurriedly shook her head. "Let's not. Tomorrow was the Spring Lantern Festival. That Ding Ting Ding had said that he would come to take the young miss away at high. I don't know if he'll try to be sneaky and secretly change the time. It'll be hard to guard against that. Take me away." Darling Chiao rolled her eyes. She made it sound like she was an object. She was a living person. If he said he wanted to come and get it, would she be able to foolishly follow him? It's not like he's sick. All right, don't worry. We'll worry about tomorrow's matters tomorrow. Let's have a good meal tonight. When Xiao Yao thought of the chicken soup that Miss mentioned, she couldn't help smacking her lips and giggling. The next day, Mo Lian personally came to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate to welcome her father-in-law's family into the palace. The Lantern Festival would be held at noon today, and the people attending were all the people she had met at the New Year's banquet that day. They were the families of third-rank officials and above. The banquet would end at Xin, and everyone could leave the palace to move about freely. The Luo family troupe would be singing in the palace for the entire day today, so the madams and young misses who were interested had gone to Clearwater Fine Park early to watch the opera. The entire Mo Kingdom capital was in a carnival tonight, and there was also a grand lantern festival. All the upper-class madams and young misses planned to join in the fun. The carriage entered the palace unimpeded. Mo Lien was summoned to the old great king's study. Before leaving, he repeatedly urged her to be careful and safe before leaving in a hurry. "Miss, there are many people today, so you really have to be careful." Xiao Yao looked like she was facing a great enemy, vigilantly checking the people walking past them from time to time. Chapter 9:12. That Ding Ting Ding said that he'll come to steal at night. According to Xiao Yao's calculations, that's when you'll be heading to the Lantern Festival. Why don't we cancel the lantern viewing event? Xiao Yao hurriedly said. No. That guy isn't qualified enough for me to change my schedule. Arbor curved her lips and snorted. Sister, what are you talking about? Xiao Lin leaned close to her and asked in a small voice as her eyes turned shrewdly. Nothing. Arbor raised her hand to rub her sister's head. Xiao Lin reached out to hold her arm. Sister, it's still early. Let's go sit over there for a while. As soon as Arbor moved, Xiao Yao followed closely by her side and followed the two sisters in that direction. Wei Ziqin still found it strange. Xiao Yao, did something happen these past few days? I keep feeling that little Mo's expression was a bit off when he looked at our Jojo today. He looked so nervous. Xiao Yao didn't dare to say anything more to Wei Ziqin. She hurriedly shook her head and said, No. Madam, you don't need to worry. His Highness is so capable. Don't worry, he won't let anything happen to Mississippi. The mother and daughters walked towards a waterside pavilion in Clearwater Fine Park. When they got closer, they saw a group of people walking along the waterside pavilion from the end of the winding white jade corridor. The one leading the group was a girl with a rather haughty attitude. Wei Ziqin recognized at a glance that this girl was the Zheng family's third miss, Her Highness Consort Zhang's niece. As for the two people behind her, they were no stranger to her. The Marquis of Placation's estate's third Miss Su Mingzhu and fourth Miss Su Mingxin. Wei Ziqin's footsteps paused, and she hesitated whether to walk over to greet them. Looking at her two daughters, they had already walked over confidently, hand in hand. Her head hurt when she saw this banquet. If interacting less with people could save her trouble, Wei Ziqin would be happy to hide away. The two groups met in the treasured jade pavilion. Crown Princess. Zheng San wasn't stupid. He nodded and bowed when he saw Arbor. Su Mingzhu gritted her teeth and tightly clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She followed her fourth sister, Su Mingxin, and bowed to Arbor while cursing her in her heart. During their encounter at the Spring Dawn Garden, she had been seriously injured. If it wasn't for the fact that her family had taken out pills to treat her injuries, she wouldn't have been able to walk in just a few days. Su Mingzhu hated Arbor so much that her teeth were itching. However, she had learned her lesson from being impulsive last time. This time, she held her breath and stood aside. She didn't say anything and just looked at Arbor coldly. Third young Miss Xing smiled at Arbor and said, This jade treasure pavilion has beautiful and elegant scenery. If the Crown Princess doesn't mind, would you like to sit down and have a drink with me? Arbor looked at her deeply and shook his head. No need. After saying that, he pulled his sister and turned to leave. Behind him, Jing San bit her lip, feeling rather aggrieved. Wei Ziqin's heart was also in turmoil. Seeing that her daughter didn't want to mingle with these girls, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. She nodded repeatedly and followed her daughter out of the pavilion. Unexpectedly, before Arbor could take 2 steps, she was bumped into by a maidservant who pounced on her. Her clean dress was immediately stained with some tea foam, looking very indecent. Arbor looked at that maidservant coldly. You did it on purpose. That maidservant trembled in fright. Her legs went soft, and she knelt on the ground. She repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Very good. Arbor's lips curled into a cold arc. I'll fulfill your wish. Chapter 9:13. Is there anyone who doesn't have eyes and dares to barge in like you on a perfectly good road? This was the Imperial Palace. Which servant girl could be so reckless and live for so long? If she was so blind, she would have been played to death by the Imperial concubines long ago. She could tell at a glance that it was fake, yet she still wanted to deceive her. Xiao Lin also pursed her lips with a displeased expression. Even with her intelligence, she could see that there was something fishy about this matter, let alone her astute and sharp older sister. The young royal maid was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she kept peeking at Arbor's expression. When he heard Xiao Mu call for help, his entire body went limp on the ground. On the side, Jing San's complexion also turned slightly pale. She didn't expect that the crown princess would be so ruthless and really want to punish that royal maid without saying anything. She didn't follow the script at all and was simply terrifying. When Lightning and the other person suddenly appeared, the noble ladies were all frightened. They watched helplessly as the two hidden guards dragged the person away. When the royal maid's miserable screams came from afar, third young Miss Zhang's small face turned deathly pale. Arbor stroked the dirt on her skirt and looked coldly at Jing San. Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to tea? Jing San nervously gripped a corner of her skirt and repeatedly nodded while trembling with fear. Yes, yes. Come, prepare the tea. The tea was quickly prepared again. At this time, Su Mingzhu was a bit scared. She felt that the crown princess suddenly staying behind wasn't a good thing. She clearly said that she didn't want to drink tea. Arbor sat in front of them. Her harsh gaze forced the young ladies to not dare to sit down. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly and stood in front of her with their hands hanging down. She leisurely picked up the teacup, sniffed it, and said indifferently, "Top-quality snow sprout tea. It looks really good. It's good that the crown princess likes it." Third young Miss Zhang sighed in relief and bowed respectfully. Come here. Arbor suddenly raised her head and beckoned to Jing San. This cup of tea is for you. Third young Miss Zhang was so frightened that her whole body trembled. Instead of advancing, she retreated several steps. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly. You look so guilty and fearful. It looks like you did something shameful. Did you add something to this cup of tea? Third Miss Xing shook her head frantically. No. How could this little girl dare to do something like murder the crown prince consort in broad daylight with so many people watching? Arbor nodded in understanding. Then you're worried that I've done something to the tea. What if I insist that you drink it now? Arbor's ice-cold eyes stared deeply at third Miss Xing, whose forehead was drenched in cold sweat. With a slight lift of her chin, Xiao Yao immediately walked out from behind her. Taking the teacup from her hand, she strode forward and unceremoniously reached out to pinch third young Miss Zhang's cheeks, pressing her entire body backward until her waist was slightly bent. Don't be so shameless when the crown princess gives you a reward. Xiao Yao coldly shouted and directly poured the cup of rather hot tea into third young Miss Zhang's mouth. MMPH, third young Miss Zhang, who was in great pain from her cheeks being pinched, resisted repeatedly with a terrified expression. She was forced to drink more than half of the tea, which splashed all over her head and face. Bam! The teacup rolled to the ground and shattered into several pieces. Third young Miss staggered and sat limply on the ground. Tea seeped out of the corner of her mouth, and she coughed awkwardly as she bent over, as if desperately trying to spit out the tea that was poured into her mouth. Chapter 9:14. When Su Mingxin saw that Arbor was enraged and had already knelt down, how could she still dare to speak? She was only an insignificant concubine's daughter. It was already good enough that she could play it safe. She was only afraid that she would be implicated by her foolish older sister. Su Mingzhu retreated many steps and hid to the side with an extremely unsightly expression. How could she still dare to speak up for third Miss Xing at this time? Young master, that palace maid confessed. She quickly walked to Arbor's side, her words causing third Miss Zhang's expression to change greatly. Arbor nodded at her. Soon, the pale-faced palace maid was dragged over like a dead dog. She did not have any external injuries on her body, but it was obvious that she was completely unharmed. Speak. Arbor coldly glanced at that palace maid. Are you a member of Sephora Flower Palace? That little palace maid trembled with fear and trepidation as she nodded her head. Third Miss Xing was furious when she saw this and couldn't help but roar, impudent. This young lady has never seen you in Sephora Flower Palace before. Don't think of randomly accusing people. The little palace maid tearfully glanced at third Miss Xing and couldn't help but wail, Miss, this servant really can't take it anymore. Just now, those hidden guards made her, an ordinary woman, suffer the pain of having her tendons torn and bones dislocated. How could she bear it? It was simply more unbearable than death. Third Miss Xing sat on the ground in a sorry state, the corners of her mouth tightly pursed as she glared fiercely at the palace maid. Her gaze seemed to be saying, do you think that now that you've confessed in front of the crown princess, your highness consort Jing will still let you off? The little palace maid trembled so much that her entire body swayed. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at third Miss Xing before turning to look at the palace maid. Why don't I take a guess? What does Young He want to do this time, unwilling to be left out? If I had fallen into your trap, then I would have had to follow you, who had atoned for your crimes by meritorious service. To change clothes, right? Xiao Mu's cold gaze landed on the junior royal maid as sharp as a knife. Let me think, where do you want to lead me to? Arbor slowly stood up and approached the palace maid step by step. You want to lead me to Younghe, right? Where are you going? Younghe must have arranged a masquerade show and is waiting for me. Arbor's eyebrows curved as he looked at the palace maid with a mocking expression. The little palace maid widened her eyes in horror. She still hadn't said anything. The crown princess had already guessed most of it. It was very simple. Arbor had exposed Younghe's fake pregnancy at the New Year's banquet. With Younghe's temperament, she would definitely not let Arbor keep this secret. She would take advantage of the situation. To have a miscarriage. Of course, it would be even better if the crown princess could suffer a great misfortune during this miscarriage. Thus, Younghe's plan was very easy to guess, and Arbor was pretty much right on the mark. In the palace, Arbor was always on guard and always kept an eye out, so how could she fall into Consort Zhang's trap? You slut. Third Miss Xing struggled to get up and bared her fangs, wanting to push that palace maid to the ground. She believed that the palace maid had secretly leaked the secret, which was why the situation had turned out this way. Tie her up. Arbor bluntly rebuked. Xiao Yao immediately took out a thick hemp rope and tightened it in her hand before walking over to third Miss Xing. The Great King has arrived. Kneel. The old Great King of Mo Kingdom walked over with a face full of anger. When he saw the situation inside the Jade Pavilion, he couldn't help but angrily shout, Crown Princess. Chapter 9:15. Xiao Mu coldly turned her head around and shot her gaze at the king, who was charging over in fury. Behind the Great King was a Daoist priest in his 40s with a clear temperament. Dressed in green robes, he appeared to have the air of a transcendent being. Gong Chang'an wiped away the sweat on his forehead as he followed behind them with small steps. Apart from the great king, the crown prince and a group of civil and military officials also quickly walked over. Arbor greets the great king. Arbor calmly bowed. Without waiting for the great king to speak, he naturally wouldn't let himself be wronged and straightened up. You! The great king's expression was filled with rage. Before he could speak, the crown prince had already flashed in front of the crown princess. Disgraceful thing! The great king opened his mouth to scold his son, but when he looked up, he saw Empress Xiao walking over with many concubines and noble ladies. After the greeting, Empress Xiao calmly said, "This concubine heard that Consort Jing just had a miscarriage in Sephora Flower Palace. This is truly too unfortunate. A while ago at the New Year's banquet, little sister Noble Consort seemed to be doing quite well. This happened so suddenly that I'm afraid there's something fishy going on." The great king instantly exploded like a lit firecracker. When he received the news just now, he couldn't keep his cool. His son, whom he had gotten at such an old age, was mysteriously gone. How could he not be furious? If he hadn't lost his rationality due to anger, he wouldn't have directly stood up and led all the civil and military officials here to settle the score with the crown princess. Now, his son had clearly made his stance firm and stood on his wife's side. With so many people present, the great king found it difficult to back down. "Daoist Dayu, please speak." The great king smirked and coldly said. It was that sage-like Daoist priest who took a step forward. His gaze swept over Arbor in a strange manner, and then he said indifferently, "This humble Daoist has calculated that there is a vicious aura coming from the southeast. It will soar into the heavens and transform into a blade that will cut towards Sephora Flower Palace. I just reminded the great king that this murderous aura might be harmful to the great king's unborn children." Priest Dayu shook his head and sighed. "I didn't expect news of her ladyship's miscarriage to arrive so soon." Mo Lien sneered, "Daoist priest, if that's the case, then you're a person who can predict destiny. Why don't you help me divine my fortune for this month? If there's even the slightest mistake, I'll take your life." "Crown Prince," the great king shouted angrily. He hadn't expected the crown prince to be so disrespectful to Priest Dayu in front of so many officials. Although Priest Dayu had been in the palace for less than 10 days, his predictions were always accurate. He could even provide the old great king with pills that could relieve his body's pressure. The old great king felt that those pills were even better than the body-strengthening pills provided by the Qin estate's patriarch. After taking them, he indeed felt much more energetic. The great king was displeased that the crown prince treated Priest Dayu in such a manner. However, Prince Mo didn't give the Daoist priest any face at all. "Withdraw. What vicious aura? It's all non-existent. If you dare to be disrespectful to my crown princess, I guarantee that even the great king won't be able to save your life." Crown Prince. The great king was truly furious this time. Wasn't his wife protecting demon a bit too much? How could he embarrass his old father in front of so many civil and military officials? How infuriating. Empress Xiao hastily walked up to tug on her son's sleeve and comforted him. "Crown Prince, how can you speak to royal father like that?" Chapter 9:16. Jung he had a miscarriage, and all of you rushed over to find the crown princess. Don't you think this is the biggest joke in the world? Your Highness, this is a vicious person. She's not suitable to be the crown princess of a country. Priest Dayu looked honest and sincere as he earnestly tried to persuade the crown prince. "Stinky priest, what did you say?" Jolin shouted angrily. She was like a lioness that was about to explode. Her hair stood on end. Crown Prince Mo mercilessly slapped the Daoist priest's cheek. However, the Taoist priest shifted his body to the side and escaped from the crown prince's palm wind. He was as fast as an afterimage as he stood steadily in front of Xiao Mu. Arbor could clearly see a trace of mockery in Priest Dayu's eyes. It was as if he was mocking her for overestimating herself. She came from a humble background, yet she wanted to fly up the branches and become a phoenix. She wanted to be the crown princess of a country. But why? It was her first time meeting this person. She could clearly feel a strong hostility from this person. Mo Lian's anger accumulated in his eyes. He suddenly drew a circle with his left hand and was about to launch a fire attack. His hand was suddenly grasped by Arbor's soft little hand. The storm-like anger in his heart was instantly soothed by her little kitten claw-like hand. The dark clouds parted to see the blazing sun. In a trance, it was a sunny day. This change could be seen by everyone present as long as they weren't blind. They couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts at the power of the crown princess. Their willful His Highness the Crown Prince had fallen into the hands of the crown princess like this. Stinky priest, what do you mean? Yunhe's miscarriage this time was caused by my vicious aura. Big sister. Xiao Lin was very anxious in her heart. How could elder sister say such words without any hesitation? What if she gave others a groundless title of Heavenly Calamity Star, or something like that? What should she do? Unfortunately, I happen to know the real reason behind Yunhe's miscarriage. Arbor's sleeves fluttered. Taoist Dayu, who had been paying attention to her all this time, subconsciously took a small step back. Two dictum talismans floated in front of her. With a whoosh, they turned into two streaks of light, directly pouncing onto third Miss Xing and the young royal maid behind her, one on the left and one on the right. What are you doing? When the great king saw the two talismans, his eyes couldn't help but bulge. He cast a dissatisfied look at his son. I already told you not to buy those messy talismans for the crown princess to play with. You all know third Miss Xing, right? Why don't we let her tell us what Yunhe wants to do to me? Crown princess. What did you do to my daughter? State Uncle Xing didn't know why, but he felt guilty and flustered without any reason, and he hurriedly walked out of the crowd to berate her. Arbor glanced at him coldly, then turned to ask, Third Miss, tell everyone what your aunt instructed you to do. Third Miss Xing began to recite Consort Zhang's instructions in full detail. When she talked about how Yunhe sent the young royal maid over to cooperate with third Miss Xing in plotting against the crown princess, planning to use a scheme to lure the crown princess to Her Highness Yunhe's temporary place of labor, the officials of the court all looked at each other. All the officials looked at each other, not knowing if they should immediately disappear and let the king deal with this family matter. Yet the great king's expression was rather unsightly. Chapter 9:17. Shut up. You unfilial daughter, what nonsense are you babbling about? Zheng Chao's face darkened as he strode over and slapped his own daughter across the face. Third Miss Zhang's head fell to the ground, yet she continued to recite her previous words over and over again about how her aunt had schemed to frame the crown princess. Zheng Chao immediately turned around and knelt down in front of the great king, crying out with a grief-stricken expression, Great King, it's that talisman, there's something wrong with that talisman. That talisman made my daughter delirious, she's completely spouting nonsense. Ignorant and ill-informed person. Arbor coldly said, haven't you heard of the dictum talisman? It would only make people reveal the truth. If Lord Jing didn't believe it. If you don't believe me, I have another one here. You can use it to test its authenticity. Zheng Chao took a step back in fright. He definitely didn't want to use that dictum talisman. If he blurted out disrespectful words to the great king in a moment of carelessness, then wouldn't all his previous bootlicking be for naught? Demon talisman. Zheng Chao could only insist that the crown princess had used a demon talisman. He scrambled over to the great king's feet and cried out in a tearful voice, "Her Highness noble consort wouldn't do that, please investigate clearly, great king." "Great king, do you still not understand?" Arbor's cold voice continued to sound. When the civil and military officials came into contact with the young lady's dark, eerie eyes, they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. In order to scheme against me and frame me, he didn't hesitate to use the child in her womb as the price to target me. Great king, can't you see such a simple matter? Arbor took a step closer, and the old great king actually unwittingly took a step back. The depths of the girl's eyes were engraved with an abyss of coldness and arrogance. No one would be able to look straight at her and would have to avoid her gaze. Why was he so sure that as long as she lured me over, the child would definitely have a miscarriage? Will the crime be framed on my head? The old king's entire body turned cold as he clenched his fist slightly. He looked at his daughter-in-law in disbelief. Because she had already calculated the time and did not hesitate to use this child to frame me. Because she killed the little prince with her own hands, intending to push me into the abyss. Impossible. The great king's eyes trembled as he roared. Great king, in fact, you already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Arbor said coldly, then returned to the crown prince's side and said no more. Priest Dayu, on the other hand, looked at her with a heavy gaze. There was a strange light in his eyes. This gaze made Arbor feel uncomfortable all over. She suddenly said coldly, "Qinghuan, kill him for me." Everyone's hearts suddenly jumped because the girl had suddenly and decisively issued an order. Priest Dayu was right about one thing. The crown princess was indeed vicious, and her murderous aura was indescribable. Screech. The giant cyan bird suddenly descended above everyone's heads, and abruptly unleashed an ice wind and snow rain at Priest Dayu. Qinghuan, a heavenly bird. Priest Dayu's gaze changed in shock, as if he had never expected that the crown princess would attack him in the palace at the slightest disagreement. He really didn't understand darling Qiao's temperament. Priest Dayu had previously wanted to kill her, so she wouldn't let him off. Whoosh! An icicle struck Priest Dayu's chest. Chapter 9:18. Arbor pressed forward, the ferrule in her hand crackling with sparks. She coordinated perfectly with Qinghuan and struck Priest Dayu's shoulder blade with a thunderous blow. Priest Dayu couldn't dodge the blow to his shoulder blade in order to avoid the icicle in front of his chest. She thought she would be able to break the old Taoist's shoulder blade, but unexpectedly, the irresistible force didn't hurt Priest Dayu at all. It was as if she had hit a pile of cotton. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. Oh no, this person's cultivation was unfathomable. It should be much higher than hers. The Taoist priest even turned his head to give her a strange smile. A giant beast's claw suddenly appeared in front of his chest like a third hand and violently struck Arbor's chest. If she was hit, she would be half crippled even if she didn't die. Qinghuan twisted her body in midair and retracted her wings, turning into human form. She held a long ice sword in her hand and slashed at the old Taoist priest's neck with lightning speed. If the thieving Taoist priest wantonly attacked Arbor, when Arbor was injured, his head would be ruthlessly chopped off by Qinghuan's ice sword. The old Taoist priest didn't dare to act rashly. He could only lean to the side and lean his body to dodge Qinghuan's sharp stab. At the same time, a fierce purple flame with monstrous anger turned into a roaring fire dragon in midair. It fiercely penetrated the old Taoist priest's body from behind and gave him a violent dragon strike. With a boom, he was smashed to the ground. There was absolute silence. All the officials trembled in fear, almost unable to look directly at the crown prince's anger. The old great king also shut his mouth at this time. The crown prince was furious as if someone had touched his reverse scale. After that fire dragon kill, a slender jet-black longsword condensed in his hand. With a sweep, the terrifying vibrating force immediately flattened all the flowers and grass on the ground, directly rolling up dust. The slender WUS sword left behind a series of afterimages, as if thousands of swords were spinning in front of everyone. In an instant, he arrived in front of the old Daoist. The old Daoist was about to die on the spot. Bang! After a loud sound, a thick smoke enveloped everyone. They couldn't help but cough as they tried to sweep away the billowing smoke in front of them. Dozens of members of the Hidden Night Pavilion appeared behind the Crown Prince. "Search the entire city and kill without mercy," the Crown Prince said coldly and expressionlessly. "Yes." Countless figures flew away. The Crown Prince's face was filled with rage, and his anger had yet to dissipate. He grabbed Arbor's small hand and pulled her with large strides as he walked out of Clearwater Fine Park. Everyone was silent, including the Great King and Empress Zhao. They seemed to be at a loss for words. The Crown Prince suddenly stopped and looked back at them coldly. "You'd better not challenge my bottom line again. Otherwise, I'll flip the sky. Destroy this land. Don't you dare touch my woman. I will make you regret ever coming to this world." Absolute silence. "Father." The Crown Prince stared coldly at his father, his phoenix eyes burning with intense hatred. "That enchantress, if you can't bear to kill her, then let your son do it for you." Zheng Chao collapsed to the ground, trembling as he looked at the Crown Prince, who had left in anger. The old Great King was also shocked, but he couldn't make a sound. When his gaze met with his daughter-in-law's, he couldn't help but tremble. "Great King, Young-hee killed your youngest son. Can this be forgiven?" Chapter 9:19. Mo Lien grabbed Arbor's little hand and led her out of the palace without looking back. He threw all thoughts of the Lantern Festival banquet and the officials to the back of his mind. The streets were already bustling with activity, and there were more and more people. The two of them shuttled through the crowd, and miraculously, no one dared to get close to them. They all opened up a path for them on both sides. Mo Lien. Arbor puffed up her little cheeks and tugged at his tightly clenched hand. She called out delicately, "Mo Lien." Mo Lien led her into a secluded alley and stopped under a winding stone arch bridge. Beside the bridge stood a 3-meter-tall stone pagoda. There were several green plants planted beside the pagoda. In the winter, the leaves had all fallen off. He stood there, his back tall and slender. Arbor couldn't help but tug at his sleeve again. "Lien." Mo Lien suddenly turned around and pulled her into his arms with one hand. He pressed her tightly against his chest and stroked her black hair with the other. The man pursed his lips and lowered his head. After a while, he said, "I'm sorry. I've made you suffer again. Let's not go to the palace anymore. I won't let anything like this happen to you again, okay?" He rested his chin on her little head and said unhappily, "Look at you. I'm not even that angry. Why are you so angry?" Arbor tugged at a strand of her hair and comforted her softly. "Your father is an old fool. It's not like you don't know that. Why are you angry with him? Moreover, you were very rude to your parents just now." "Don't do that again," Arbor said softly. "They're not nice to you. I'm angry at them." Mo Lien rubbed her head in frustration. "Because you're my baby, I hope that the whole world will treat you like a baby." Mo Lien's thoughts were too easy to understand. Arbor's eyes flickered, and he nudged his head in his arms. "Then, your mother already has a knot in her heart. If you do this, I'm afraid they'll dislike me even more. Don't worry about Young-hee." Arbor's eyes flashed with a cold light. "Since she dares to scheme against me, I will not let her have a good end." I'll get someone to deal with her. So what if she made her father unhappy? This time, Mo Lien had steeled his heart to want her dead. This woman had crossed his bottom line too far. She actually thought of such a malicious method to frame his Chow Chow. The plot did not succeed because of Jojo's cleverness, not because of that bitch's benevolence. Young Hee has been doted on for so many years. She is your father's true love. Arbor hugged his waist and looked up at his gloomy face. He raised his hand and stroked his forehead. True love. Mo Lien snorted, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. I want her to lose everything. She can't enter the royal tomb until she dies. If he did not grind this person's bones to dust, he would not be able to get rid of the hatred in his heart. Lien. Xiao Mu wanted to console him a bit more, but he hugged her tightly instead. No one can bully you, he said in a low voice beside her ear. Arbor thought about it and let it go. Don't look at how this guy usually likes to ask you if you're okay, as if he's asking for your opinion. In fact, he has already made a decision in his heart. Anyway, she just had to do it before he did. And she just happened to learn an interesting talisman. She wanted to find someone to try it on. Chapter 920. When Young Hee was dragged out of Sephora Flower Palace and sent to the Cold Palace, the cut on her leg was still bleeding incessantly. Nanny Sue wiped her tears and pulled at the few old nannies along the way. But how could she be a match for those burly nannies? After a few slaps, she couldn't make a sound. The Great King has decreed that Consort Zheng's heart is vicious and her morals are lacking. In order to frame the crown princess, she wantonly plotted to murder the royal heir. No one can surpass her viciousness and treachery. From this day forth, she will be demoted to a palace servant and placed in Chonghua Palace. Without an imperial decree, she is not allowed to take half a step out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Xingru collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Mammy Sue hastily ran forward and tried her best to help her up. Gong Chang and couldn't help but sigh when he saw the wretched master and servant pair. He rolled up the imperial decree in his hand and said, Xingru, the Great King is very disappointed in you. In order to frame the crown princess, you actually harmed the flesh and blood in your womb with your own hands. You even caused a serious conflict between the Great King and His Highness the Crown Prince. This matter has already been investigated. From this day forth, you can stay in Chonghua Palace with peace of mind and properly reflect. Let's go. Gong Chang and turned around and led 4 or 5 old nannies and a few young eunuchs out of Chonghua Palace. Eunuch, eunuch. Mammy Sue lifted her skirt and knelt. She scrambled forward on her knees and wept miserably. Eunuch, please put in a few good words in front of the Great King. Our imperial consort was wrongly accused, eunuch. She absolutely didn't harm the royal heir. The crown princess's heart was simply punishable by death. She clearly knew that their imperial consort wasn't pregnant at all, but she told the Great King that Her Highness the noble consort had personally harmed the royal heir. What a terrible woman she is. Gong Chang and abruptly stopped and turned back, a cold glint flashing through his eyes. Seize her. Slap him. 2 ferocious old mamas immediately rushed over and clamped down on Mammy Sue's arms from both sides. Paw. 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 Remember this clearly. From today onwards, there was no empress. You are an old nanny, and she is just an old palace maid who is not favored. Let's go. Gong Chang and waved his hand and led everyone out of the cold palace. When he went out, he couldn't help but look back at the people inside. He secretly warned himself, don't be as stupid as the women inside. After causing so much trouble, she ended up in the cold palace. What a joke. On the way back to the central palace, Empress Xiao was silent for a long time before she turned to look at old Nanny Huaxian, who was walking slowly beside the carriage. Do you really think that the crown princess doesn't know that Jingru's stomach is fake? Huaxian slightly raised her head and bowed to Empress Xiao. Actually, Empress already has an answer in her heart, isn't that so? Empress Xiao only felt a slight chill in her heart. This time, Yunhee really went for wool and came home shorn. She originally wanted to collaborate with Priest Dayu and frame the crown princess for the child's miscarriage. Who would have expected that she would end up with the bad reputation of murdering her own child and framing the crown princess? Yunhee could forget about crawling out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Empress, after going through so many things, you should be very clear. Don't rashly offend this little prickly head. Once she pricks people, you will die. Empress Xiao felt that she might need to re-evaluate this crown princess. When the carriage passed by the outer walls of Chonghua Palace, Empress Xiao turned back to take a look. Chapter 921. Morning Cloud Restaurant. When Duan Yu received the news, he immediately ran over. When he came upstairs, he saw the crown prince and involuntarily pursed his lips. Why is he here too? Jojo, where are your younger siblings? We were in the palace earlier, so we left early. Arbor said dryly, they should have returned home already. Duan Yu sat down across from the two and poured himself a wine cup. Speak, what happened now? After saying that, he glanced at the crown prince. What's up with this guy? Don't think he couldn't tell that the crown prince was sitting there with a dark face and a gloomy aura of displeasure emanating from him. It's already been resolved. Arbor rubbed his cheek noncommittally. By the way, Duan Yu, didn't you say you were going to take me to see the flower lanterns? Right, we'll leave after drinking this cup. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Mo Lien. Oh, right. I heard a funny thing these 2 days. That Ding Ting Ding or something has set his sights on you, right? What does he want to steal from you? What do you think? Mo Lien gave him a cold look. What do you think this crown prince loves the most? Cultivation methods, spirit medicines. Maybe it's some precious spirit weapon or even a divine weapon. Duan Yu nonchalantly drank a mouthful of wine before sneakily sidling up to him. Hey, why don't you tell me? That thief sage, speaking of which, he never misses. He never misses. What exactly does he want from you? Could it be? Is it your life? The crown prince threw him a cold look and turned to look at Arbor. Duan Yu almost spat out the mouthful of wine in his mouth. Seeing that he was about to spit, Arbor hastily shrunk into the crown prince's arms and even pulled up his sleeve to block his face. In the end, Duan Yu didn't spit out the wine so rudely, but he choked and coughed repeatedly. When he finally managed to catch his breath, he exclaimed, "What? Ding Ting Ding wants to steal Jojo away. Hey, I say, you two still dare to come out like this?" Duan Yu hastily moved the stool next to them and squeezed over to sit in a row. Let me tell you, that Ding Ting Ding has never failed before. Jojo. Seeing that Duan Yu's claw was about to land on Arbor's small hand, Mo Lien abruptly reached out and directly tossed his claw to the side in disdain. Duan Yu ignored him and continued to drag his stool to Arbor's side. He said solemnly, Jojo, how about we don't go see the lanterns? You should hurry back. That Ding Ting Ding is about to show up. Arbor abruptly turned his head and glanced at Duan Yu warily. She suddenly reached out and pinched Duan Yu's left cheek, pinching it hard as she asked, You wouldn't be that Ding Ting Ding in disguise, right? This time, it was the crown prince's turn to almost spit it out. The two men looked at Xiao Mu in bewilderment. Why was this child so good at acting? She acted as if it was real, as if she was really suspecting Duanyu. Duanyu hastily pulled her hand away and kept yelling, "Ouch, ouch, ouch, ouch. Jojo, we've been together for so long. Don't tell me you can't even recognize me and that ding-ting-ding." Arbor pursed his lips and released his grip on Duanyu's handsome face. "Since we're already out, we're already out. We're going to see the lanterns, and I still have to go set off the river lanterns. Why are you in such a bad mood because of some random person?" Chapter 922. The three of them left Morning Cloud Restaurant and followed the sounds of gongs and drums as they walked toward the crowd. At this time, a dozen people carrying stools and hose ran out of the building across the street. 4 to 5 people chased after them, shouting, "Tea-fees," and the like. Mo Lien reflexively grasped Arbor's small hand and pulled her to her side to avoid the surging crowd. "Jojo. Mom." Arbor hastily turned her small head in Mo Lien's arms. Wei Ziqin quickly rushed over and sighed in relief when she saw that she was safe and sound. She went up to hold her hand and said, "I finally found you. Mom, you didn't go back with younger sister and the rest." We went back. It's just that a letter from thief Sage Ding-Ting-Ding came to our house." "What letter?" Mo Lien, Duanyu, and Arbor asked in unison. Wei Ziqin took out a letter from her sleeve and sighed in relief. "Jojo, it's good to see that you're fine." "Oh right, why did thief Sage Ding-Ting-Ding write you a letter?" Arbor opened the letter to take a look. There was nothing written on it except for Ding-Ting-Ding's signature. What kind of trick was this neurotic person up to? Arbor crumpled the letter and tossed it on the ground. She then pulled her mother's hand and said, "Mom, don't bother with that senseless person." "Oh right, how did you find me here?" Wei Ziqin's eyes flickered, and she quickly said, "Mom felt that there must be something fishy about this Ding-Ting-Ding sending you a letter. I waited for you at home for 2 hours, but when I saw that you didn't return, I was truly panicking. I was afraid that something happened to you, so I came out to try my luck and see if I could find you." "All right, Mom, I'm fine. There are too many people here, so let's find a more empty place to talk." Arbor held her mother's hand. Wei Ziqin hurriedly nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. "Jojo, your father is still waiting for news at home. He's very worried. Why don't we stop shopping and go home first?" Arbor nodded. "Okay." Wei Ziqin and Arbor walked in front of the two men. After a while, the people who came out of the tea house to ask for money rushed over. In an instant, the mother and daughter were pushed to the front. The two men reacted instantly. When they wanted to catch up, they were blocked by a large group of people. "Get out of my way." Mo Lien panicked and sent out a palm strike. Many of the people around him were sent flying. "Damn it." Duanyu cursed softly. Auntie Wei was the person they trusted the most. Who would have thought that Ding-Ting-Ding would be so deranged and pretend to be Auntie? Mo Lien was very anxious. She took out her communication jade talisman and scribbled a line of words on it. "Everyone, heed my orders. Quickly search Clearwater Fine Park. Don't miss a single corner." Jojo's mother probably hadn't left the palace yet. After Mo Lien put away her talisman, she looked at the sea of people before her. She couldn't care about anything else in her anxiety. She leaped into the air with a whoosh and stepped onto the eaves. She chased in the direction that Wei Ziqin left with Arbor. This scoundrel of a bitch Ding-Ting-Ding. When he caught him, he would definitely dismember him into 1,000 pieces. Duanyu also leaped into the air. With a tap of his foot, he paused on a bald uncle's head for a split second before disappearing in front of the crowd. The bald uncle's thoughts, fuck. Chapter 923. Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Mu opened her weary eyes, and she could vaguely make out Mo Lian's handsome face, which was magnified and anxious, continuously wavering before her eyes. Jojo, you're awake. Mo Lian heaved a sigh of relief and pulled her into his arms. He patted her back gently, not knowing if he was comforting her or his own restless heart. You scared me to death, Jojo. Don't ever leave me again. Mo Lian hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, You don't know how dangerous it was just now. We were separated in an instant and you were taken away by that bastard Ding Ting Ding. Oh right. Arbor propped herself up and looked at him blankly. Mo Lian, my mother just now. My mother, wasn't she? Yes, yes, yes. Don't worry. I've already sent someone to look for her. She'll be fine. She should have been left in Qingshui Fine Park by that Ding Ting Ding. He actually dared to touch my mother. Arbor's eyes were burning with rage. Mo Lian was slightly startled. Then, he held her slender waist and lowered his head to say to her in a low voice, Don't worry, mother will be fine. As for you, does your neck still hurt? Ding Ting Ding, who was pretending to be your mother, hit the back of your head. Does it still hurt? Arbor shook her head. When they were separated by the crowd, she turned to look at Mo Lian. She didn't expect Wei Ziqin to suddenly hit her. It could be said that she did not guard against her mother at all. So she was unusually angry now. No, she was resentful. This Ding Ting Ding, he had really blown the matter out of proportion. She hated it when people touched her mother. Ding Ting Ding was just playing a game, but now her mother was implicated. Originally, she didn't have much of an opinion about this playboy. A prodigal son, was just a little playful. But now, she hated him. Mo Lian reached out and cupped Arbor's little face. Her eyes were watery as she said, Jojo, I'm not happy that you're thinking about someone else in front of me. I want that person to die, Arbor said coldly. Mo Lian's hand, which was cupping her little face, paused for a moment before she continued, When I rescued you just now, I was anxious to check on your condition, but that guy escaped. Although Duan Yu chased after him, I don't know if he can catch up to him. Arbor pursed his lips. Mo Lian hugged her and helped her stand up. Only then did Arbor realize that the two of them were by a tranquil river. The curved river flowed quietly, and the river lanterns carried the light. It floated from the upper stream all the way down. A faint light flickered in front of their eyes. At this moment, the surroundings were tranquil and quiet. The people on the street seemed to have disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only the spreading darkness of the night. Jojo, do you want to release the river lanterns? Mo Lian held her little hand and walked to the riverside. Xiao Mu nodded her small head. He reached out and swiped at the air, and a beautiful lotus lantern appeared in his hand. I heard that on the Lantern Festival, if you write your wish on it and release it with the current, you can brush away an entire year's bad luck and fulfill your wish. Arbor finished writing it in a flash. The two of them stood by the riverside hand in hand, watching that river lantern float away with the current. Mo Lian tilted her head and looked down at Arbor. Jojo, what wish did you write? You really want to know? Chapter 924. And, I want to know. He hugged her and lowered his head, his breath slowly drawing closer. He opened his mouth and a strange fragrance floated out. Xiao Mu's lips curled into a chilly smile. My wish is, the man's eyes were filled with a faint light as he stared at her in a daze. Arbor suddenly swiped with her hand. The startled swan dagger suddenly jumped out of her consciousness. With a terrifying speed comparable to that of flowing light, it instantly stabbed into Mo Lian's heart. I want you to die. Mo Lien's eyes widened in shock. With an expression of disbelief, he stared at Arbor beside him. She had acted too quickly. He did not even have time to react. Or perhaps it should be said that tonight, the lights and starlight reflected off each other, causing him to involuntarily sink into her dazed gaze. The dagger in her hand sank into his heart, and even fiercely spun in a circle. I want you to die by my hands tonight. Arbor spat out these words with a cold expression. Without hesitation, she pulled the dagger out of his chest. On the startled swan dagger, a trace of blood slid down the shiny dagger, leaving not a single trace. You are not him, you don't look like him at all. My Lien is not as smelly as you. It's not comfortable to hug. It's uncomfortable. Arbor coldly stared at him, continuously scolding, ding ting ding, or it's more appropriate to call you the snake beauty. No matter who you are, I have no interest in knowing. The little girl's voice was so cold and heartless. In that instant, it caused his heart that had not wavered for decades to crack a little. Now, you can die. Arbor coldly stared at him. Her fingers moved slightly, and a startled swan dagger quickly slid towards his neck. Black Lotus fell backwards and plunged into the river with a bang, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Arbor chased 2 steps forward, looking down at the murmuring river. A strange coldness floated in her eyes. Ha! He escaped quite quickly. However, he had been stabbed in the heart, so he didn't know if he would be able to return alive. Her mother was not someone anyone could touch. She had said it when she was at Xiao Ben's house. Whoever dared to touch her mother would have to be prepared to die without any hesitation. Arbor put away the startled swan dagger with cold anger in his eyes. He turned around and walked towards the crowded street. As soon as they reached the street, they saw Mo Lien and a group of people running towards them. Jojo. Mo Lien saw the baby in the crowd at a glance. She hurriedly rushed over and scooped the baby into her arms. His restless heart finally relaxed slightly at this moment. You're so stupid. The little emperor baby punched him unhappily. If you lose me again, I won't come back by myself. Mo Lien pressed her tightly into his embrace at once and stroked the back of her small head. No, I won't anymore. I definitely won't. Arbor curved her little mouth and looked up at him. Have you found my mother? I found her. Mo Lien nodded. She's in a palace maid's room in Qingshui Fine Park. She's not injured. When our people found her, she was just asleep. She's fine. Arbor's lips curled coldly. So what? He touched my mother. In my eyes, he's a dead man. She rejected this kind of evil joke. Chapter 925. The two of them hurried back to the Qiao residence and specially went to their mother's beautiful view court to take a look. Although Wei Ziqin's face was a bit pale, she was generally fine. Now that they asked her, she actually didn't know what had happened at all. Seeing her tired expression, Arbor didn't want to say anything more to her. After exhorting Xia in a few words, she left the room with the crown prince. Qiao Zhongbang followed the two of them out and anxiously asked, "What the hell is going on? Why would Ding Ting Ding suddenly leave your mother in Qingshui Jiayuan's palace maid room for no reason? I heard that room had been empty for a long time. If little Mo hadn't sent people to search it up and down, I'm afraid that your mother wouldn't have been found unconscious there for 4, 5, 6, or 7 days." At the mention of this matter, Arbor's face was filled with anger. She clenched her fists tightly. "Father, it's my fault this time. I didn't take that matter to heart. I implicated Mother." From beginning to end, Arbor didn't take the matter of Ding Ting Ding coming to steal her as a big deal. In the end, he harmed Mother for no reason. Simply preposterous. That senseless person. I wonder if he's dead now. Mo Lien held Arbor's hand and sent her to the entrance of Nanju Garden. She softly said, "Shout ye led people to search the lower reaches of the river, but didn't find any trace of Ding Ting Ding. I think he might have escaped. Damn stinky man." A trace of ruthlessness flitted through Arbor's eyes. "Do you know who he is? That day, we met that woman in the underground village, the Snake Beauty. Do you still remember? She's Ding Ting Ding." Mo Lien couldn't help but come to a realization. Did he grasp some special ability? Can he change his figure and face at will? This was much more brilliant than any disguise technique. No matter how many transformations there were, how could you turn a man into a woman, or an adult into a child? Even his voice could become no different from Wei Zichin's. His special ability is really very special. He can change the human body's bones, internal organs, and even meridians at will. So even though her knife seemed to have pierced his heart, it was possible that he had already moved his vital organs at the critical moment. Arbor frowned, feeling a little regretful. If this person was not dealt with, he would become a huge problem in the future. If he were to hide himself, where would they find such an ever-changing person in the vast sea of people? Mo Lien held Arbor's hand tightly. "Jojo, could it be that the underground organization has their eyes on you? Otherwise, why would Ding Ting Ding want to get close to his Jojo again and again?" Arbor sneered, "If they dare to come, I'll kill them. I'll make it so that they won't be able to leave." Even he had no clue about the underground village for the time being. Previously, he had asked the various fortifications to pay close attention to the empty villages nearby to see if there were any changes, but in the end, they had not found anything. He didn't know if it was because he had cleared out the Snake Beauty's underground village last time, but these people might have become vigilant and started to lay low. "All right, don't think so much. You should also go back to sleep early." Arbor tugged at his hand and said softly. A good lantern festival was completely ruined by that senseless person. Arbor felt a little suffocated in his heart. After sending Mo Lien off, he washed up a little and lay down on the bed. After the third night watch, Arbor opened his bright eyes. His body moved, and he flipped over and sat up. With a flick of his fingertips, an invisibility talisman automatically split open without any wind. Chapter 926. Arbor's figure instantly disappeared into the night. He swept out of the Qiao residence and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. A good show was put on in Chonghua Palace that night. Because Xingru was a newcomer and a favored consort in the past, she had always put on airs and acted high and mighty wherever she went. Now that she was in trouble, there were plenty of people rushing to step on her a few more times. Noble consort Lin, who had always been at odds with her and was also the third Prince Mo Ting's mother, specially gave a few words of advice to the head steward of Chonghua Palace. The head steward immediately understood tacitly. On Jingru's first day in Chonghua Palace, she hadn't even been in the cold palace for an hour when she was fiercely taught a lesson by a bunch of old consorts in the cold palace. Afterwards, she was thrown into the most remote woodshed on the west side. They glorified it by saying that they were giving a has-been noble consort the best treatment of a solitary woodshed. The others all lived in the same courtyard and didn't have the preferential treatment of a has-been noble consort. Although it was small, it was still a private territory, wasn't it? Xingru was used to being pampered and spoiled, so how could she endure this vicious beating? That night, she developed a high fever from anger. Mammy Sue was so anxious that a string of small blisters formed on her mouth. In addition, she had just been beaten by a vicious old mama until her lips were cracked and her entire face was swollen. She and Jingru both needed a doctor and medicine. However, when she went to Chonghua Palace's steward in the middle of the night to ask for medicine, she was ruthlessly ridiculed by the steward. Her original words were, "Who do you think you are? Are you still that noble consort from Sephora Flower Palace? Are you worthy of me going to the Imperial Physician Building overnight to invite a doctor with your lowly status? Don't joke around. Hurry up and scram to wherever you live. Otherwise, you can't avoid a good beating." Mammy Sue thought of the ruthless methods of that group of old concubines and immediately did not dare to make a fuss. She hurriedly fetched another bucket of water and returned to the woodshed, planning to apply a cold compress on Jingru to lower the temperature. Who knew that as soon as she opened the door to the woodshed, she would see Jingru lying on the ground in pain, clutching her stomach as she rolled back and forth. Mammy Sue was so frightened that she spilled a bucket of water on the ground. She strode forward to help Jingru up and repeatedly asked, Xiaoru, how are you? Xiaoru. Mammy, it's so painful. Mammy, it's so painful. Jingru grabbed Mammy Sue's hand. She was in so much pain that her eyes were filled with tears and her face was pale. Xiaoru. Mammy Sue stared at Jingru's face in shock, only to see that the skin on the side of her chin looked as if it had been burned by fire. It was wrinkled and even had a circle of blisters around it. Jingru did not notice the changes on her face at all. She only felt that her stomach was churning, as if it was going to burn her to death. It was so painful that she was sweating all over. When Arbor sneaked over, she just so happened to see Jingru's miserable appearance. Oh, what a coincidence! The beautifying pill's effects finally took effect. Just the added heat poison nether star seed was not as strong as the 6 young poisonous flowers' medicinal properties. If she had obtained the 6 young poisonous flower earlier and added it to this beautifying pill, would she have needed to wait half a month for it to take effect? Arbor did not have the slightest bit of sympathy in her heart. If not for this Jingru coming up with such a treacherous scheme to frame her during the day, how could she have pushed the boat with the current and brought her to the cold palace? What was this called? This was called not harming others but harming oneself. She only had herself to blame. Arbor stood outside the window with a cold gaze, silently looking at the master and servant pair shouting and wrangling inside. Chapter 927. A few days ago, she just so happened to learn a particularly interesting talisman. Arbor swiped his hand and took out 3 ebony pieces from his inner world. His lips curled into an icy smile. Rather than having the crown prince do it, why not let her personally dispose of this person? In any case, in the king's heart, she probably already did not have a good impression of her. Adding this incident would only add a thick stroke of vicious and merciless to her reputation of being cruel and ruthless. Yoonghee, Yoonghee, are you prepared to meet your death? You really got off too easy. I originally wanted to let you have a taste of the pain of the heat poison wrapping around your body. The ebony pieces flashed and abruptly flew into the woodshed, silently hovering in midair. Jingru shuddered all over. She seemed to have alertly sensed something, and she abruptly turned her head. Wet nurse, she shrieked. Mammy Sue hastily turned her head and saw the glistening talisman energy flickering on the ebony pieces. It's a talisman. Mammy Sue cried out in alarm. In that instant, a loud boom was heard, and the entire woodshed turned into shattered pieces of wood. Following an earth-shattering explosion, it shot into the night sky. This time, don't just mention Chonghua Palace. The entire inner court of the palace, or even the entire royal capital, was fiercely alarmed by this sudden explosion. Everyone jumped out of bed, hurriedly put on their clothes and ran out of the house. The senior manager had just sent away the troublesome Mammy Sue not long ago, so she hadn't been sleeping soundly to begin with. This explosion completely blew her mind awake. The light in the small study of the Eastern Palace's side palace was still faintly lit. Mo Lian was still handling some urgent official business. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by this explosion, and he threw down his brush and stood up. Hui Feng. Hui Feng jumped in through the window with a whoosh. Your Highness, the sound came from Chonghua Palace. Mo Lian narrowed her eyes slightly. Did Hidden Flower bring people to make a move? Hui Feng immediately shook his head. This subordinate is certain that it isn't. That's true. Hidden Flower had clearly told him to find an opportunity to make a move within 3 days. According to Hidden Flower's playful yet cautious personality, he would at least wait until tomorrow night to deal with that troublesome woman. Your Highness. Do you want this subordinate to go investigate the situation? Hui Feng hastily asked. No need. Someone will definitely come to report the situation later. The Crown Prince had just finished speaking when the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the walls of the Eastern Palace. Your Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince couldn't help but be startled. He didn't expect the fastest person to be lightning. Why aren't you with Jojo? Not good, Your Highness. Lightning leaped into the Crown Prince's small study, wiping his sweat as he hastily said, Crown Princess ran to Chonghua Palace overnight to settle accounts with Consort Jing. Exasperated, Hui Feng hastily interjected, what did the Crown Princess do? The Crown Princess threw out 3 explosion talismans, and they were especially powerful. All of a sudden, Her Highness Consort Jing and her room were blasted into the sky. The Crown Prince was startled, but then he laughed heartily and said, good, good, good. As expected of his little emperor darling. Look at how this move immediately alarmed the entire city. Hui Feng snuck a glance at the Crown Prince. Seeing how the Crown Prince was laughing, could it be that this matter was worth spreading? Hui Feng's mouth twitched as he said, there's no such thing as Consort Jing. It's merely royal maid Jing Ru. Chapter 928. Lightning nodded repeatedly. That's right, she tossed Jing Ru into the sky. At first, he didn't know what was going on. If it weren't for someone deliberately moving the leaves he was hiding in, he probably wouldn't have discovered that the Crown Princess had left in stealth mode in the dark. He and 2 hidden guards had followed the Crown Princess to Chonghua Palace, only to witness such an exciting scene with their own eyes. Thus, he hurriedly ran over to inform the Crown Prince and give him a heads-up, lest the Crown Prince didn't know anything and couldn't respond in time. Mo Lian nodded repeatedly as he listened, his gaze gentle as he gazed out the window. Jojo didn't want to make things difficult for him, so he chose to do it himself first. This child's gentleness simply made his heart ache. Your Highness, this matter should have already alerted the great king and queen. Mo Lian nodded and quickly walked outside. Let's go take a look. When the old great king of Mo Kingdom received the news and heard that the Crown Prince had already gone to Chonghua Palace to check on the situation, he didn't go. Gong Chang and stood to the side, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead as he said in a trembling voice, Jing Ru and her house were blown into the sky. The scene was pitch black, so we couldn't tell what caused the explosion. Mo Lei sighed. How is she? He didn't expect that something would happen the same night after he issued a decree to send her to the cold palace. The old great king didn't feel good either. After all, she was the person he had doted on for so many years. If she was gone all of a sudden. She's severely injured and only has 1 breath left. Gong Chang and said in a low voice, but that Mammy Su by her side is miraculously unharmed. Oh. Mo Lei's gaze sharpened as he stared at Gong Chang and. In the face of imminent disaster, that unruly old servant didn't protect her master immediately. That's not it. Gong Chang and hurriedly shook his head. It said that the old servant wears an extremely powerful defensive mystic weapon. A mystic weapon recognizes its master. In the end, it protects its master more. Gong Chang and said softly. Mo Lei's expression turned cold. What is the background of that Nanny Sue? This humble one once saw an extremely powerful mystic energy erupt from her body. She seemed to be a level 12 mystic cultivator. She should be someone that Shantian Prefecture placed in Ligay Courtyard. The Ligay Courtyard was considered a dance studio used by the Wang family. It was different from ordinary folk dance studios and nurtured high-end talents. Otherwise, the Jing family would not have arranged for Consort Jing to enter the Ligay Courtyard to be a little singer and actress. It was because she could get in touch with the great king at Ligay Courtyard that Consort Jing was willing to go there. The old great king sighed. Send him to the Imperial Physician Building for a good look. She had been with him for so many years. No matter what, she couldn't bear to do it. Have you found out who's behind this matter? Is it? The old king suddenly paused halfway through his words. How could Gong Chang and dare to answer? He had been with the great king for so many years, so how could he not know what the great king was thinking? The great king wanted to ask if His Highness the Crown Prince had hired someone to do it. After all, His Highness looked like he wanted to immediately execute Jing Ru. Sigh, forget it. The old great king waved his hand and said, don't continue investigating. If the investigation really led to his son, could it be that he would behead his precious son for a consort? Therefore, there was no point in investigating. Chapter 929. By the time Empress Xiao received the news, Jing Ru had already been sent to the Imperial Physician Building for overnight treatment. She couldn't help but sneer. The great king still can't let go of his consort Zheng after all. Your Highness, you don't need to feel uncomfortable, old Huaxian said softly. Old Nanny Huaxian said softly, Jing Ru is already a thing of the past. She can never rise again. Who knows? If she manages to pull through this time. Pull through. Old Huaxian laughed. Your Highness, you don't know. It said that Jing Ru's face was completely destroyed by the force of the explosion. Is that so? Empress Xiao was slightly shocked, but she asked without batting an eyelid, what did the great king say? The great king's intention is to drop this matter and not continue investigating. Jing Ru has been released from the cold palace. That's not the case. However, the great king will probably send an imperial physician to follow her back to Chonghua Palace to take care of her. Ha! Empress Xiao sneered. That's right. The great king still cares about his face after all. This person was only released into the cold palace on the day of the Lantern Festival. If he were to release her a day later, he'd probably feel embarrassed too. Old Huaxian thought so too. She nodded and said, that's good. It saves us the trouble of sending people to keep an eye on Jing Ru. Let our people watch over her for a few more days. Once she's completely settled down, we'll transfer them back. Okay. The Crown Prince. The Crown Prince went to Chonghua Palace and returned to the Eastern Palace after seeing that there was nothing to do with him, old Huaxian said with a twitch of her mouth. Actually, not to mention the great king, even Her Highness probably thought that the Crown Prince had sent people to do this. This child. Empress Xiao shook her head, her eyes filled with affection. The next day. Xiaomu listlessly crawled out of bed and bounced several times on the ground the moment she got out of bed. Is this a morning temper? A laugh came from outside the window. Arbor ran to the window and opened it. She saw the man in white sitting at the stone table under the flowers and trees. He waved his hand at her lazily. Boom! Arbor hurriedly closed the window and looked down at his disheveled appearance. His little face couldn't help but blush. What was this guy doing here so early in the morning? Miss. His Highness has sent you a sumptuous breakfast. Oh, just leave it there. Arbor found a shirt and put it on. While washing up, he asked Xiaoyao, he came here so early in the morning just to bring me breakfast. That's right. His Highness has been waiting for you for a while now. Xiaomu tossed the cotton cloth into the water basin and pattered over to open the door. You must have snuck in. He probably didn't go through the front door and didn't alert her parents at all. Yes. Mo Lian nodded seriously. I climbed the wall. Arbor. This guy said it so proudly. What's going on? Jojo, come. Today's breakfast has your favorite flour honey and shrimp cake. He took out a food box covered with a thick cotton cloth. It was still warm when he took it out. How is it? Seeing her take a bite, Mo Lian couldn't help but chuckle. Why did you suddenly think of making breakfast for me? Do I need a reason? I just wanted to make you something delicious. Prince Mo lifted her to his knees and whispered in her ear, Baby, you're the best. Chapter 930. What's so good about me? Arbor said indignantly. I was the one who blasted Jingru into the sky, but in the end, those rumors are still targeting you. She had already heard about it from Lightning. The Great King and Empress Xiao's first suspect was Prince Mo. That was why they didn't continue investigating, because they were afraid that they would find out about their precious son, which would put them in an awkward position. Mo Lian giggled and swayed Jojo as she hugged him. It's okay. I'm happy to take the blame for Jojo. Arbor rolled her eyes at him. Then what was the point of her running over to Jingru in the middle of the night? Why didn't they think that I was the one who did it? Darling Qiao disagreed and patted her chest. I'm a great talisman master. The 3 explosion talismans I threw at Jingru were high-level explosion talismans. Otherwise, she wouldn't have blasted Jingru into the sky. Prince Mo laughed with amusement. Maybe it's because you don't look like a high-level talisman master. Blame her for being too low-key, Arbor thought. Although your father isn't that great. Arbor glanced at Mo Lian and pinched his face. But he's really good to you. For your sake, let's forget about it. She couldn't be bothered to argue with that old fool. Forget it, forget it. She was a magnanimous person and wouldn't bicker with that old fool, the Great King. Mo Lian's heart inexplicably softened. She quietly gazed into Arbor's eyes for a long time before saying softly, Jojo, you don't have to suffer because of me, okay? I'm your husband. Naturally, I have to shelter you from the wind and rain and sweep away all obstacles. Arbor straightened her back and extended a small fist. I'm your wife. I can also shelter you from the wind and rain. Mo Lian couldn't help but laugh out loud. He lowered his head and kissed her soft little face. Wife. Why? Wifey, wifey, wifey. Mo Lian called out several times in a low and seductive voice. This made the little fellow's face turn red. Her heart was jumping up and down. Looking at him was very annoying. Don't come any closer. Arbor saw his curved thin lips close, hurriedly reached out a hand, forcefully covered his mouth. He patted his chest with his other hand, as if he was trying to stabilize his heart. Could he stop flirting with her? She felt that her heart was about to jump out of her chest. How was she going to resolve this? Mo Lian laughed in a deep voice. She bent her elegant and slender neck. A strand of black hair brushed past her eyebrows and lips, tickling them. Hurry up and eat. If you don't eat, the food will get cold. The crown prince pulled down her little hand. Without another word, he picked up a plum blossom-shaped pastry and stuffed it into the little fellow's slightly open mouth. Next time, I want to eat a cicadere-shaped pastry. Okay. And a bear-shaped one. She purposely made things difficult for him. No problem. Xiao Yao, His Highness' culinary skills would only improve under Mrs. Whipping, right? In front of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. A fat lady in her mid-20s walked up the steps of the Qiao estate, her body swaying as she walked up the steps of the Qiao estate. Who are you? The gatekeeper immediately focused his gaze on her and asked vigilantly. Miss Qiao. The fat girl staggered to the entrance of the Qiao estate and fell down without warning, smashing into the main door with a bang. Who exactly are you? Chapter 931. Your internal injuries are a bit serious, so you need to recuperate properly. Arbor sat on the edge of the bed and put down the chubby girl's wrist. Rest well. Xiao Bao. The chubby girl wanted to prop herself up, but she didn't have the strength and fell to the side of the bed. Arbor turned around and looked at her with a complicated expression. Did I cause trouble for you? The plump young lady fidgeted with the hem of her clothes as she stealthily peeked at Mo Lien with shrinking eyes. Mo Lien pursed her lips as her cold gaze paused on the chubby girl's face for a moment before looking away. Even so, the chubby girl still felt cold all over, as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. It's fine, you can rest here and recuperate. We'll go out first. Arbor nodded at her and reached out to take Mo Lien's hand, dragging her out. I don't agree. Mo Lien hadn't gone far when she said in a low voice, You're so smart, so you should know that there's something wrong with this person. How can you leave her behind and put her in danger? Could it be that you really believed that excuse of hers? Mo Lien cast a glance behind him and gazed coldly at the fat young lady's residence. She's called Xiang Yuanyuan. I met her when I went to the Qin estate to apply for a maidservant position. Arbor pointed with two small fingers and looked up at Mo Lien. At that time, none of those maidservants were willing to pay attention to me. Only she would take the initiative to talk to me. Prince Mo looked at this childish little fellow and couldn't help but be speechless. Looking at her somewhat bashful expression, Mo Lien's gaze finally relaxed after a long time. She reached out to pat her little head. Actually, our Jojo really wants to make friends. Humph. I don't have friends. Xiao Mu pridefully turned her head and walked outside. Xiang Yuanyuan said that on the day of the competition, Omega Kotoku had specially arranged for a group of people to kidnap the eldest daughter of the Qiao estate. I know she's lying, or rather, Omega Kotoku is lying, Arbor said calmly. With Omega Kotoku's cultivation, how could he allow an ordinary person to eavesdrop? How could she clearly tell Xiang Yuanyuan that Mu Xiaobao was just an alias and that her real identity was the first miss of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate? No one would believe that it wasn't intentional. Mo Lien nodded. It's good that you understand. This lie was full of loopholes. Unless young Master Omega Kotoku released Xiang Yuanyuan of his own accord, it was impossible for an ordinary girl like Xiang Yuanyuan to escape from the Qin estate. Knowing the second young master's plan, she could only be a dead person. Right now, I just don't know what Qin Exean wants to do. Arbor frowned and walked out of the guest courtyard where Xiang Yuanyuan was staying. Do you believe that this Xiang Yuanyuan is innocent? Mo Lien's expression was slightly grave. Arbor glanced at him and shook her head. I don't. Then why aren't you throwing her out? Although she's just an ordinary person, who knows, she might be able to give you a fatal blow at a critical moment. Mo Lien paused in the middle of his words. He sighed softly and held her small hand. Perhaps she used to be pretty good, but now, none of us know what she'll do next. I know. Arbor nodded obediently. I'll send her away after treating her injuries. It won't take long, at most 4 to 5 days. I'll send someone to keep an eye on her. If she makes any strange movements, for your safety, I'll send someone to deal with her. Chapter 932. Arbor looked at him exasperately before suddenly running to his side. She raised her small hand and quickly rubbed his taut handsome face. Lien. All right. I'm very smart, so I won't fall into other people's schemes. Arbor said softly, so don't worry, all right. Lien looked at her and nodded helplessly. Let's go, accompany me to Beautiful View Court to visit Mother. Arbor's eyes lit up, and she walked away while holding his hand. Lien couldn't help but smile faintly when he saw her holding hands so naturally. Lien section break, inside the Talisman Patrician family's main hall. Mu Qianqian stood resentfully in front of her father, Mu Boming, and questioned indignantly, Dad, why won't you let me participate in the competition? Could it be that my talisman energy is inferior to second sister Mu Zhilan's? Why does she have the qualifications to participate, but I don't? When Mu Boming's eldest son, Mu Xingyu, saw this, he hastily walked up and said, Qianqian, how can you speak to father with this kind of attitude? Hurry and withdraw. Mu Boming felt more and more uncomfortable as he looked at this good-for-nothing daughter of his. She caused trouble time and time again in the palace, but was humiliated instead. The great king even reminded her that she needed to come back and properly teach her etiquette and norms. This truly made him lose all face. How could Mu Boming, such a prideful person, allow his daughter, this troublemaker, to cause trouble for him every time? The 8 great patrician families' competition this time was related to the allocation of quotas for the Mystic Beast Forest's secret realm, so they couldn't tolerate the slightest mistake. Their Mu family had to grab 1 or 2 quotas, and if it was safe, 2 quotas would be the best. You should properly stay at home and learn talisman arts during this period of time. Dad. Mu Qianqian's voice became very shrill. Mu Boming rudely interrupted her. Shut up. Your talisman drawing talent isn't high in the first place. Back then, it was father who thought of many ways to barely help you activate your talisman energy. Tell me, has your talisman energy made any significant progress these past few years? Even Jilan, who entered the sect later than you, is now on par with you in terms of talisman power. They were both beginner talisman masters and skilled talisman masters. Your talisman drawing speed is not even comparable to Jilan's. What you need to do is to thoroughly reflect at home. Mu Boming's words made Mu Qianqian's lungs about to explode from anger. She was her father's biological daughter, yet her father treated the second branch's Mu Zhilan differently. On what basis? Mu Zhilan stood at the side and smiled. She said softly, Uncle, please don't be angry with Sister Qianqian. She will work hard and in the future, she will definitely be able to catch up with Zhilan. When Mu Qianqian saw that little white flower's dainty appearance, she got angry all over. After glaring fiercely at Mu Zhilan, Mu Qianqian turned around and left the hall without looking back. I must participate in the competition. It doesn't matter if you give me a spot or not. Mu Boming angrily rebuked, unfilial daughter. Watching his daughter's departing figure, he was so angry that he broke a handrail. But how could Mu Qianqian be delighted? After she returned to her room, she closed the door and furiously smashed it. Suddenly, she turned around to look at a pitch-black figure that had appeared in the corner of the room. Her eyes brightened abruptly before falling silent again. She said with a trace of cold fury, You didn't keep your promise. Master Black Cat chuckled. It's naturally impossible for someone like me to do something as stupid as keeping my promise. Chapter 933. You. Mu Qianqian was so infuriated that the roots of her teeth were itching, but there was nothing she could do. Is it done? I heard that your 8 great patrician families will be holding a martial arts competition in 2 days. Master Black Cat boldly answered Mu Qianqian's question and spoke in a hoarse voice. What do you want? Mu Qianqian asked indifferently. I also want to go and take a look. I wonder if Miss Mu can bring me along at that time. Master Black Cat said with a smile. Moreover, I also want to personally witness the effects of this soul swap curse of mine. Mu Qianqian remained silent. Isn't that so? Master Black Cat let out a hoarse laugh. This soul swap curse is something that I nearly spent my entire life to draw. Eldest Miss Mu, I want to personally see you use it. Mu Qianqian couldn't resist asking, how did you know? I want to use the soul swap curse on the days of the competition. Master Black Cat spread his hands. This old man guessed, but I didn't expect that I guessed correctly. This old man was thinking that since you want me to finish crafting this soul swap curse in 7 days, you must be in a hurry to use it. Give it to me. Mu Qianqian stretched out her small hand. Master Black Cat shook his head at her. Eldest Miss Mu, you seem to have forgotten to give me something. Mu Qianqian bit her lip. Recalling their previous transaction, she simply steeled her heart and took out a small square wooden box from her pocket, stuffing it into Master Black Cat's hands with her eyes closed. For you. Master Black Cat finally smiled happily and took the wooden box from her. He opened it to take a look, and a pleasantly surprised expression appeared on his face. Good, good, good. With such a one-of-a-kind summoning talisman, I will definitely be able to copy and research it. Ha ha ha. Mu Qianqian's lips couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. There are so many people in the talisman patrician families, and some seniors couldn't even figure out this summoning talisman in their entire lives. You. Copy. Ha ha. Master Black Cat pursed his lips in displeasure and harumphed coldly. That's your talisman patrician family. The talisman practitioner's talents are all very ordinary, so how can they be mentioned in the same breath as this old man? Master Black Cat is indeed absolutely confident. Of course. Master Black Cat smiled eerily and abruptly shot out a wooden box of about the same size from its sleeve, flinging it into Mu Qianqian's hand. The soul exchange talisman must be used carefully. You'd better keep in mind what this old man has said before. Don't get yourself into trouble, ha 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 ha. Black Cat Master said with a joyful expression, as if he was watching a good show. However, most of his face was hidden under the pitch-black hood, so Mu Qianqian simply couldn't see it clearly. You can leave now. Mu Qianqian bluntly chased the guest away. Be careful when you go out. It's still daytime right now after all, so you mustn't let anyone see you. Miss Mu, I'll see you on the day of the competition. The Black Cat disappeared from her room in a flash. Leaving behind a series of hoarse and unpleasant laughter, he said, this old man is really looking forward to that day. It's really delightful to be able to see my work play a role with my own eyes. Mu Qianqian tightly gripped the small wooden box in her hand as she coldly enunciated each word. I'm also looking forward to it very much. Achoo! Achoo! Arbor closed a small window in passing and rubbed his nose. He set down the medical book in his hand and called out, Xiao Yao. Why is it so noisy outside? Chapter 934. Mississippi. Xiao Yao walked in a huff and angrily flung the things in her hands to the side. Isn't it that old sixth Chiao and his family again? They're here to make a fuss again. Arbor had been busy recently, so after settling old sixth Chiao and his family in a small residence on Shiluo Street, she let them be. After all, each family had their own matters to attend to, and she couldn't possibly take care of everything. What's the fuss about? Arbor asked indifferently, her expression much more distant. 3 days ago, their family came to ask Madam for a large batch of food and cloth. It's enough to last them for at least half a month. I didn't expect them to come again today. How can they have the nerve? Xiao Yao was about to die from anger. I already told them that Madam isn't feeling well today and can't receive guests. But they're still unwilling to let it go and insist on seeing Madam. Isn't that Xiao Yao also a mystic cultivator? How can she not have any ability to live independently? They come here every 2 to 3 days to ask for food and cloth. It's not like our Madam owes them anything. Does it belong to them? Ah! A bunch of blood-sucking fellows. Their hearts are truly rotten to the core. Xiao Yao chattered non-stop, infuriated. Arbor waved at her. All right, look at you. Don't you think it's funny that you're angry to this extent? I'm angry that they're like this. Xiao Yao became angrier the more she spoke. Shouldn't people have self-awareness? How can they always think that Madam treats them well and self-righteously think that it's only right? Our family doesn't lack food or cloth, but we're not saints. Could it be that we have to bless all living things? Shine the light on everyone. It's simply baffling to the extreme. Arbor couldn't help but snicker. This was her first time seeing her Xiao Yao so angry. Look at how angry you are. If my brother Xiao Hu sees this, he'll think that I bullied you. Miss. Xiao Yao blushed and rolled her eyes. Why are you still in the mood to joke with Xiao Yao? You can't barge in, you can't. Ah! From the outer courtyard came the cry of a servant girl. Bang! Bang! It was the sound of someone being kicked to the ground. The moment Xiao Yao opened the door, she saw Xiao Yao leading the way, leading her parents, old 6th Qiao and old 6th Qiao, towards their room. Xiao Yao was so angry that she pointed a trembling finger at them and said angrily, You! Who gave you the guts to barge into our young Mrs. courtyard? Get out! Xiao Yao swatted her hand away. She was already prepared and had already used her profound energy. Xiao Yao was caught off guard and was brought to the side of the door by her force. When she turned around, she saw that Xiao Yao had already walked into Mrs. room with a gloomy and cold expression. Men! Do you want to die? Xiao Yao angrily roared. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Lightning and the others' figures immediately landed beside Xiao Yao and looked coldly at 6th Uncle Qiao and 6th Aunt Qiao who were cowering by the side. Arbor, I know a secret of yours. Do you want them all to be present so that I can tell you right now? Xiao Yao raised her chin and stared at her with resentment. As if the girl in front of her wasn't her clan sister, but an enemy. Arbor's heart slowly turned cold. I don't have a secret. You do. Xiao Ya's voice suddenly rose. Chapter 935. Then say it. Arbor's voice turned cold. Are you sure you want me to say it now? Arbor. Xiao Ya had a resolute, you can't take it, expression on her face. This caused Xiao Mu to involuntarily be a bit curious. Heh, what weakness could Xiao Ya have on her? She really wanted to know. Don't be ungrateful. Xiao Ya shouted angrily. 6th Aunt Xiao hurriedly ran up and held on to her daughter's arm. Crying, she admonished, Xiao Ya, don't go crazy. Let's go back quickly. Don't speak to the crown princess like that. What crown princess? She's the crown princess who eats people without spitting out their bones and stepped on us to get to where she is. Xiao Ya angrily shook off her mother's arm and looked coldly at Arbor. I'm asking you, after doing such a thing, do you have a conscience? Without waiting for Arbor to get angry, Xiao Yao angrily punched Xiao Ya's back. Get the fuck out of here. Putting on a self-righteous face. Who do you think you are? Why would our miss have a conscience? Xiao Yao's profound strength cultivation was definitely above Xiao Ya's. With this punch, Xiao Ya could forget about speaking. Arbor's small body swayed and grabbed Xiao Yao's fist. Then, he turned to look at Xiao Ya. Arbor said indifferently, say it. Although she admitted that she wasn't a good person, she disdained to do those petty things. What secret could Xiao Ya have? What a joke. Xiao Ya rolled her eyes and revealed a determined expression. Do you really want me to say it here in front of so many people? Say it or not if you don't want to. Arbor impatiently swept a glance at Xiao Ya. Sixth Aunt Xiao hurriedly hugged Xiao Ya's arm. Xiao Ya, mother is begging you. Don't make a fuss anymore. Let's go home, go home. I'm not going back. Xiao Ya forcefully shook off Sixth Aunt Xiao's hand, pointed at Arbor, and angrily rebuked, do you think you can send us away like beggars by giving us a few days' worth of food and a few bolts of cloth? Arbor. You wish. You owe us all of this. Xiao Yao's lungs were about to explode on the spot. She was about to blurt out a curse when Arbor reached out and stopped her. Xiao Yao stole a glance at her Mississippi. At this moment, she really had to admire her Miss's unchanging face. Paralysis. Face. Yes. She had people pointing at her nose and scolding her, yet she was still able to remain so calm and collected. Sob, sob, sob. Sure enough, the young miss who did not show her emotions was the best. Arbor. I know your secret. Xiao Ya's face was right in front of her. Her eyes were staring straight at her like a pair of dead fish eyes. This kind of Xiao Ya was very unfamiliar. Arbor's heart was filled with emotions. The big sister Xiao Ya who would hold her little hand and give her half a steamed bun to eat was indeed gone. Arbor. You predicted that there would be a zombie outbreak in the village that day, didn't you? Following Xiao Ya's angry shout, Arbor's heart instantly sank. She really did not expect that the so-called secret that Xiao Ya wanted to expose was actually this. Her rebirth was indeed her life's biggest secret. She did not even tell Mo Lian. As for Xiao Ya, it was impossible for her to have such an imagination to connect her to the fact that she was reborn. Slightly stabilizing her emotions, Arbor coldly said, I don't know what you're talking about. Chapter 936. Stop pretending. Xiao Ya smiled coldly. Arbor, you started hoarding food at least 10 days in advance. Hoarding cloth. Hoarding all kinds of daily necessities, I wasn't wrong about that, right? Arbor gazed at her coldly, her hands tightly clasped together. Why did you do that? Xiao Ya's eyes flickered fiercely as she looked at her. Can't I do it out of my personal hobby? Even Xiao Yao knows that I have a hoarding hobby. Sister Xiao Ya has been my neighbor for so many years, so how could you not know? What a joke. What did hoarding in advance mean? It had nothing to do with a zombie outbreak. No, you knew that the zombie outbreak would happen that day. My mother already told me, so don't try to deny it. Xiao Ya tilted her head and approached her with an abnormal expression. Do you still remember the 2 horses you sent to our family on the day of the zombie outbreak? Why did you do that? Because you knew that the zombie outbreak was going to happen that day. Because of that, your entire family had already prepared carriages to escape. Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Arbor, isn't it? Everyone present looked at Arbor in shock. The Qiao family servants, who were attracted by the angry yell, all shuddered in fear, wishing that they could never enter eldest Mrs. courtyard. This kind of terrifying secret didn't seem like something they should hear. No. Xiaoyao charged over like an enraged female beast and slapped the chattering Xiaoya to the ground. Our miss has had a hoarding hobby since she was young. She just likes to collect things. Is that not okay? If her mother hadn't let it slip, she wouldn't have known that the 2 horses that helped her family escape from the hellish Quoto village were sent by Arbor. Moreover, from what her mother said, when Arbor sent the horses over, she repeatedly requested for their family to move to Shijiao City together. Every time her mother brought it up, she would say with great regret that she didn't listen to that little girl's words back then and leave with them. Would those things not have happened? Do you know how we survived all these years? Xiaoya angrily glared at Arbor with hatred. When we escaped from Quoto village, I wasn't a mystic cultivator yet. I'm only 12. Our family of 3 are all ordinary people. Under those difficult days, I had no choice. I could only rely on myself and continuously sell my body to make my way to the capital with great difficulty. What's funny is that your mother has the nerve to ask my mother how we got to the capital in the past few years. Ha 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 ha. Xiaoya suddenly jumped up from the ground and threw herself in front of Arbor, wanting to grab her shoulders. Lightning reacted very quickly and pulled out her long sword, blocking her hands. You selfish woman, why didn't you say so back then? We're all from the same village. We are still from the same family. That's how you treat us. If you had told us that such a terrible thing would happen and told us to prepare in advance, would I have become what I am today? Xiaoya couldn't help but scream angrily, the whole village was killed by you, you selfish woman. It's you. It was you who killed them. How cruel of you to do this. You'll be happy seeing the entire village die in the mouths of zombies, right? Arbor, let me tell you, you owe us all of this. Even if you use everything you have now to repay your debt, it won't be enough to repay the sins you committed. Shut up. A deep and angry shout came from the courtyard entrance. Chapter 937. You're wrong. I don't owe anyone anything, including you. Arbor walked over to Prince Mo's side. In fact, since the zombie outbreak in this life, many things had changed from her previous life. The zombie outbreak had also happened earlier than in her previous life. When Arbor left the horse with Sixth Aunt's family, she had thought of persuading Sixth Aunt to leave with them the next day. Who knew that something would happen that night? Of course, with her cold personality, she would not bother to explain so much. Since the ending was already decided, why bother explaining? Jojo. Mo Lien directly held her small hand and turned around to walk into the room. You can just leave it to your subordinates to deal with this kind of discontented person. Xiao Laolu hurriedly knelt down and stammered, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please forgive our Xiaoya. Bang! With a sweep of his sleeve, Mo Lien shut the door to the room on the spot. Arbor's mood was indeed somewhat low. She quickly stole a glance at him and said, You heard everything, didn't you? He pulled her aside the draping curtain and led her to the table. He pressed her to sit on a small stool. Jojo. I did know that the zombie would go berserk, Xiao Mu quickly confessed. I knew. Mo Lien also sat down beside her and looked at her with a smile. Didn't you also remind me to be careful on the way back to the capital? Arbor's expression was slightly startled. Mo Lien, I didn't know that the zombie outbreak would happen earlier. I could have entered the city earlier, so when I escaped that night, although I made sufficient preparations, I was still a bit flustered. Don't you think that I'm very strange? Arbor asked softly. What's strange about it? You're such a little fool. Mo Lien reached out and pulled her into his arms, gently patting her head. You were just a 7-year-old child. It was already good enough that you were able to take care of yourself and your family. No one has the right to demand otherwise from you. Moreover, to him, the common people and the thousands of paths were not as important as his JoJo. He didn't want her to protect anyone else. He only wanted her to protect herself. At your age, if you rashly ran to the villagers and told them about this, they would have been killed. Who knows, he might even be burned as a demon who spouts nonsense. Mo Lien said coldly, so, don't believe Xiao Ya's words. You're not wrong. Aren't you going to ask me how I know about the zombie outbreak? Arbor looked at him nervously. Mo Lien shook her head and patted her back. That's not important. Say it when you really want to. But I hope that you won't suppress too many things in your heart. Can you promise me? Arbor nodded lightly, feeling much more relaxed. Let them leave the capital. She understood Prince Mo too well. Don't be fooled by his gentle appearance, he already had murderous intent in his heart. Once Xiao Ya's family left the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, it would be their time to die. If she spouts that so-called secret. Mo Lien didn't want her JoJo to have any more trouble in the future. Arbor raised her little head proudly. They're just a few weaklings. Why would I be afraid of them spilling the secret? Tsundere darling. Chapter 938. Mo Lien extended a slender finger and tapped her jade-white forehead, chuckling softly. What a stubborn child. She clearly wanted to let them live, but she said it in such a cold and heartless manner. Old Xiao's family of 3 was politely ushered out of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. Upon hearing the news, Wei Ziqin hurried to the door and said coldly, "Please wait." "Ziqin, are you really sick?" Faint astonishment flashed through 6th Aunt Xiao's eyes. Even she thought that Wei Ziqin was avoiding them earlier. Wei Ziqin had a sickly expression and a thick fur cloak draped over her shoulders as she was helped out of the door by Chunying. When she heard this, she couldn't help but sneer. There are some things I originally didn't want to say, but you shouldn't blame JoJo. Back then, she wholeheartedly wanted to take all of you with her. 6th Aunt, speak with your conscience. Was it because you were obstinate and didn't want to leave? Cough, cough. Madam. Chunying extended a hand to support Wei Ziqin's arm. After Wei Ziqin was brought back from Clearwater Fine Park that day, she had caught a bit of a cold and hadn't recovered from her coughing. It was especially cold today, so she shouldn't have come out to be exposed to the wind. Wei Ziqin raised her hand to stop Chunying from speaking. She looked indifferently at 6th Uncle Qiao's family and said, I understand my daughter better than anyone else. Even if you treat her a bit well, she will return it 10 times over. I'm guessing that she originally wanted to go over the next day to persuade you, but that night, no one knew that zombies suddenly broke out in the village. Did we want that to happen? No one wanted that to happen. Wei Ziqin reprimanded loudly, her expression somewhat agitated. Ziqin, we understand. Your health isn't good. Go back and rest first. 6th Aunt Xiao's eyes shrank as she glanced at Madame Wei. Wei Ziqin took out a storage talisman and handed it to 6th Aunt Xiao. Take good care of it. There's enough supplies for 3 months inside. Drip a drop of blood and you can retrieve it. From now on, everything between us will be written off. All of you. Please take care of yourselves. After Wei Ziqin finished speaking, she didn't wait for Qiao Lalio's family to reply and turned to enter the house. With a cold face, Chunying slammed the door shut with a bang. 6th Aunt Xiao opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but when she caught up with the stairs, she saw the door close with a bang. For a moment, she felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know why, but she had the urge to burst into tears. It was as if he had pushed this family out with his own hands. This feeling of a complete break was really hard to bear. Early in the morning the next day, the family of 3 boarded a donkey cart that they had contacted and quietly left the Mo Kingdom capital. The carriage was shaking slightly. Xiaoya was curled up in the innermost part of the carriage. She hugged her knees with her hands and kept her head down in silence. Xiaoya, it's all my fault. It was mother's wrong decision, so. Xiaoya lowered her head and shook it slightly. Her voice was low and there was a hint of sobbing in it. It's not your fault, mother. It's my fault. I thought too much of a person's heart. It's my fault. She thought that she had abandoned her, betrayed her. The instant they met again, she even felt that that person was too dazzling. She really wanted to destroy this dazzling person with her own hands. The little donkey cart rocked out of the Mo Kingdom capital. Xiaoya seemed to see 2 half-grown little girls holding hands by a small stream in Quoto village. Eat. She stuffed half a steamed bun into Xiaoya's dirty hands. But all of this couldn't go back. Xiaoya suddenly burst into tears. Chapter 939. For the sake of fairness, the 8 great patrician families' competition venue was set at the Assembly of Worthies Martial Arts Club. The owner of the martial arts club, Ho Ping, was a woman in her early 40s. She was quite astute and capable, so she started preparing the venue for the 8 great patrician families' competition 3 days in advance. Arbor had nothing better to do these 2 days, so she stayed at home to draw talismans. If not, she would read medical books. She didn't really want to go anywhere because she was a bit lethargic. When Duan Yu came to visit her once, he even gave her a heads up and divulged some information, such as who the Duan clan would send out for the competition and who was relatively more formidable. He had mercilessly sold out all the members of the Duan family who were going to participate in the competition to his little Chow Chow. Do you have a grudge against the Duan clan? Arbor looked at him exasperatedly. That's right. Duan Yu folded his slender legs and looked at her with a grin. Jojo, let me tell you. I heard that you can use anything in this competition. What concealed weapons? Medicine. That mystic beast, of course. You can also use talismans or anything. Here, I will provide a large box of concealed weapons as a friendly gesture. You can use it without worry. If you don't have enough, come get more from me. Arbor. Why did she feel like this guy wanted to see the world plunged into chaos? Let me tell you. Those Omega Kotoku, Eldest Qin and the like aren't qualified to participate. This is a competition for youths under the age of 20. You can definitely do it. You can definitely beat those little bastards to a pulp and make them cry for their mommy and daddy. Are you an old person? Arbor rolled her eyes. He spoke as if he could participate. Duan Yu pursed his lips. That's right, draw more talismans in the afternoon. The more the better. At that time, I'll sit and watch you smash them to death with talismans. Sleep early tonight. Otherwise, you won't have the energy for tomorrow's competition. Xiao Mu's mood suddenly turned for the better when she saw the brat prattling on and on. You're so annoying. How am I annoyed? Duan Yu followed her petite figure as she paced back and forth. I'm speaking the truth. Just focus on making more preparations. Then do you know who among the younger generation of the Mu family is an expert in using talismans? Right now, she really wanted to find someone to compete with her in talismans, alright. What was the name of that guy from before? Mu Liangde, right? What a weakling. Just thinking about it made him angry. Could there be someone more reliable who could compete with her on talismans? Someone like you. Duan Yu shook his head honestly. No. However, among the Mu family's younger generation, the most talented one is Mu Zijuan. He is 18 years old this year. His talisman drawing is not bad, right? At the very least, she's much more impressive than the likes of that Mu Qianqian. Duan Yu said with a chuckle, but this person is a lunatic who uses talismans. You have to be careful. Even lunatics can participate in the competition. Tisk, that talisman aristocratic family, in order to obtain a spot, not to mention a madman, even an idiot would be released. Alright, Arbor nodded. Duan Yu, who in the Duan family do you especially want me to beat to death? Seeing as he had helped her quite a bit in the past, she would help him all the way to the Western Paradise. It would be easier to make a move after finding out his name. Duan Yu's eyes brightened, and he quickly whispered into her ear. Arbor abruptly turned around to glare at him. Why are there so many people? Duan Yu's eyes curved into a smile, revealing his white teeth. Emichem. Beat them to death with all your might. I'm relying on you, Jojo. Arbor looked at him speechlessly. I'll do my best. Chapter 940. Nighttime. Inside Chonghua Palace's eerie little woodshed. Zhengru lies on the ice-cold ground, feeling the approach of death. Her entire body feels like it's in a furnace, so hot that her entire body feels like it's going to burn up, burning from the inside out. The Imperial Physician Building's doctors can still handle the surface burns, but the heat poison inside the body is something that almost all of the doctors are helpless against. Heat poison. When has she ever been poisoned with heat poison? When Zhengru hears this news, she almost can't believe it herself. Who in the palace isn't like her, eating and drinking every day with extreme caution? How could she be poisoned with heat poison without rhyme or reason? Creak. Because Zhengru suffered a serious blow from the explosion, her neck is also seriously injured, so she's basically unable to lift it right now. But she's very clear that these footsteps are Mammy Sue's voice. Ever since she was demoted to the cold palace, that damned girl Kaling abandoned her and never came to see her again. Now, there's only Mammy Sue by her side. If even Mammy Sue leaves her, she simply can't imagine it. Heh, you're actually so miserable and so useless. You can only lie here like a cripple, moaning and lamenting about nothing. A low and hoarse sneer pierces Zhengru's eardrums, a voice that seems to come from the netherworld. It's a pity that she can't move her neck. And because her eyes were damaged by the explosion, her vision is already very blurry. It's only when the person follows Mammy Sue in front of her and gets very close that she can clearly see that this short man is one of the short clowns from the Luo family troupe. He's very short, and his face is also strangely ugly. Mammy Sue, you. Zhengru wants to prop herself up to sit up, but she can't move at all. Mammy Sue looks at her and sighs, Xiaoru, this is Shuntian Prefecture's Black Darren. You don't have to be afraid. Lord Black is here to help you. Zhengru suddenly became excited. Although her vision was blurry, she still tried her best to widen her eyes, wanting to see the clown's expression clearly. Really? Lord Black. The short ugly man sneered. Noble Consort Jing actually ended up in such a wretched state. To be honest, you're useless even if you don't die. The clown's words made Mammy Sue's entire body tremble as she hastily stretched out her hand to grab his sleeve. Sir Black, you didn't tell me this before. You said you would help our Xiaoru. Su Fang, have you been with Consort Jing for too long? You're too emotionally invested in her. Remember who your real master is. Sir He shouted coldly. Mammy Sue trembled all over, and then her voice faded away. She shrunk her neck and lowered her head. There's only a dead end in front of you, but let's see if you dare to take a gamble at the final moment. Sir Black laughed coldly. His laughter was very hoarse, and it was completely different from the voice he pretended to use when he was singing. Jingru trembled all over, and she tried her best to widen her blank eyes to look at the clown. The clown stretched out his hand and took out a black pill that emitted a strange smell. This is a strong recovery pill. As the name suggests, after you eat it, your whole body will immediately recover, and your body will regain its former youth and beauty. Even your physical strength will be stronger than before, Kikik. As soon as Xingru heard this, her eyes lit up with the hope of survival. Chapter 941. Heavens! It could actually heal her completely in such a short period of time. Could such a miraculous medicine really be given to her? Xingru did not notice Mammy Sue's trembling gaze. She struggled intensely for a moment. Can you give it to me? Sir Black. As long as you can heal my body completely. I swear, for the rest of my life, I will serve Sir alone. The clown snickered and extended his hand to hand over the pill. There's no harm in giving it to you. Xiao Ru. Mammy Sue suddenly cried out in shock. Following that, she gave the clown a sinister look, causing her entire body to tremble uncontrollably. Her shoulders trembled and she took 2 steps back. Mammy Sue, wait for me to recover and regain the great king's love. I will give you unparalleled glory and benefits. I will definitely repay you well. Xingru was extremely agitated. She opened her mouth, waiting for the clown to feed her. The clown snickered. But you have to promise me one thing. Within 7 days, you have to get rid of the woman you hate the most. The clown rolled his eyes. Who is the woman you hate the most? It's Arbor. It's her. That slut, she's the one who caused me to be in this state. Jingru's eyes emitted traces of poisonous light. Very good. It's her. After you kill her, you must remember to chop off her head and give it to me. This way, you'll have completed your mission. Sir Black snickered. Yes, this subordinate will definitely complete the mission. Ahaha, but you only have 7 days. I'm only giving you 7 days. Yes. In order to recover her beauty, in order to recover her body and be able to walk normally, Xingru was willing to give it her all. Sir Black nodded satisfactorily. Then, don't disappoint me. Xingru. After that, with a flick of his finger, that strong revival pill accurately entered Xingru's slightly open mouth. This pill that emitted a strange stench was probably the most delicious pill Xingru had ever eaten in her entire life. Tomorrow, you'll be able to return to normal. Sir Black twitched the corners of his mouth with a strange expression. He then glared at Su Fang, who was standing at the side with a sympathetic expression, and brought her out of the woodshed. There was no moonlight tonight, under the pitch-black night sky. Sir Black's eyes were like a hawk's, staring at Mammy Sue's face. Watch your mouth. It's still the same thing. Recognize your true identity as a master. Yes. Mammy Sue's shoulders drooped, trembling as she followed Sir Black for a few steps. Then she couldn't help but ask, "But sir, do you really think that Xiao Ru is able to deal with the crown princess in these short 7 days?" Until now, Xingru still didn't know that although the strong revival pill that she had eaten could completely restore all the muscles and bones in her body in a short period of time, she could only exist in perfect condition for 7 days. After 7 days, her body would instantly collapse into a pile of minced meat, without any possibility of recovery. Eating this strong revival pill actually meant that Xingru had completely stepped onto a path of no return, and there was no hope of survival. Hee hee. Sir Black laughed strangely. Who knows? I'm just making use of what little value she has left, that's all, ha 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 ha. Prince Mo destroyed our Shantian Hall so miserably for that little girl from the Chow family, it's time to collect some profits from him. Chapter 942. Noon had yet to arrive. In the entire assembly of Worthy's Martial Arts Center's competition arena, the spectators had already successively headed to the private seats on the second floor. A long row of tables and chairs had been set up in a circle near the railings. Today, all the reputable figures in the Mo Kingdom capital had basically come to watch the competition. Those with lofty statuses had all been arranged seats. The juniors from the various clans who had come to watch and learn naturally could only stand behind their elders. Although the assembly of Worthy's Martial Arts Center wasn't small, it was still crowded when 1,000 people were squeezed inside. As a result, some of the smaller clans' patriarchs weren't arranged seats and could only stand slightly further back to watch. Even so, those who could come basically all came to watch. After all, this was a rare competition. The entire Mo Kingdom capital was seething with excitement because of this 8 great patrician families competition. At this time, the common people were also gathered outside the assembly of Worthy's Martial Arts Center, relishing in the discussion of this grand competition. In order to let those common people know the results of the competition, the Martial Arts Center's master, Ho Ping, even specially had people sit in front of the Martial Arts Center and set up tea for a live broadcast, just like a storyteller. A group of people came after hearing the news, surrounding the streets to inquire about the news. Each and every one of them was more excited than the people about to compete. Hey, I heard that one of the 8 great patrician families was chased out of our Mo Kingdom capital a few days ago. Then why is it still the 8 great patrician families competition? You don't understand this, right? I heard that the Chow family that was chased out is the Crown Princess's family. They don't know what's good for them. Who knows what kind of bizarre thing they did to anger our Crown Prince, so they were chased out. Now, the Crown Princess's father, the Marquis of Jiyuan, is in charge of the Chow family. Right. I also heard that the Crown Princess will be representing the new Chow family in the competition this time. I'm so excited. It's a pity that I'm not part of the 8 great patrician families, so I can't go in to watch the competition live. They're here. Wow, the Qin Estate's 2 young masters are here. In the blink of an eye, the entire street was covered in the screams of love-struck fools. Duke Ziqin, young Master Ziqin. Oh, my Duke Qin. When Mo Lian led Xiao Mu down from the carriage, she saw a large group of neurotic women chasing after and intercepting something in front of them. With a single glance, he saw 2 young masters of the Zither estate trying to break through the group of women under the heavy protection of more than a dozen servants. Make way. Please make way. Arbor was almost embarrassed to death by them. A bunch of idiotic women, as if they had never seen a handsome man in their lives. Wow, it's the Crown Prince. Your Highness, it really is your Highness. Long time no see, your Highness. Damn it. Fuck, stop squeezing. Squeeze your sister. Jojo, save me. Crown Prince immediately turned into a pitiful little boy and bitterly followed behind Arbor. He even very naturally reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist, blocking her in front of him. This bastard. Scram. Seeing that a pervert's hand was about to touch Mo Lian's handsome little face, Arbor threw a punch and threw the pervert out of the circle. Jojo, save me. On the other end, Duan Yu was dragging Situ Yi over. Their clothes were a bit disheveled from the tugging, and they ran over with pale faces. Arbor was furious, and with a karate chop, he knocked down a certain woman who refused to let go of Duan Yu's sleeve. Why aren't you fighting back? They were all idiots. Don't you know? Our Mo Kingdom capital has a written rule that mystic cultivators are not allowed to attack normal people without reason. Chapter 943. Oh. So it's like that. Arbor dryly responded and silently retracted her small hand. Seeing the men beside her strangely stifling their laughter, Arbor asked seriously, "Then did you guys see me attack?" "No." They shook their heads at the same time. "Right, I'm just a baby. I definitely didn't attack. I'm warning you guys, stop tugging. Try stretching your paw over here and see. I won't bite you to death." Arbor irritably slapped away a plump paw and squeezed her way through the crowd. Just as she arrived at the entrance of the martial arts center, she came face to face with the two young masters of the Qin family who had squeezed their way over with great difficulty. "Ayaya, it's Xiao Bao." Eldest Qin's eyes brightened, and he ostentatiously waved his hand at her, smiling like a flower. Xiao Mu rolled her eyes at him and was about to squeeze past them into the door without another word. At this time, an especially bold 18-year-old young lady dashed over like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. With a shriek, she threw herself at the Qin estate's eldest young master. Miss Qiao simply reflexively raised her leg and sent the other young lady flying with a somersault. That wind-like movement, from extending her leg to sending her flying, was simply done in one go. This caused the surrounding young masters' mouths to twitch as they inwardly chuckled. The 18-year-old young lady's rustling as she fell into the crowd attracted a wave of curses. Soon, there were people criticizing Arbor all at once. "How could a young lady like you attack? You're a mystic cultivator, right? Don't you know that mystic cultivators can't attack ordinary people in our Mo Kingdom capital?" The middle-aged woman who was criticizing her was rather agitated. She even went around shouting, "I'm telling you guys. My sister-in-law was injured by a little mystic cultivator a few days ago." "Ha! A mystic cultivator attacking an ordinary person, that's too inappropriate." Right, we can go to the capital magistrate's office to report her. Don't think that we don't understand the law. How am I a mystic cultivator? Do I look like a mystic cultivator to you?" Arbor asked expressionlessly. She indeed didn't look like one. How old was a soft and adorable little lady with a stoic face? How could she send someone flying with a kick? Could it be that their eyes were playing tricks on them just now? Bad way. Chilming. Amidst the hubbub, two groups of very obvious shouts could be heard from the left and right. The crowd had no choice but to move to the side a little, making two small paths for people to pass through. Hong Bai of the Hong clan and Fan Chilming of the Fan clan each led two small teams and walked over in an imposing manner. Most importantly, there was a large group of men and women following behind him. Let's call them fans for now. They carried large flags and slogans, and there were even people who specifically directed the fans to shout slogans in unison. They were valiant and high-spirited, as if they were raising a flag to rebel. Xiao Mu's gaze swept over before she rolled her eyes and uttered, "Idiot." Prince Mo held back his laughter and coughed lightly. "Jojo, there are too many people here. Let's go in." Arbor nodded. Just as he was about to turn around, he saw an average-looking man in his mid-20s squeeze out from the crowd behind him. He jogged the entire way and feigned a forthright laugh. He stretched out his arms in a hug and ran towards Duanyu, who was on the steps. "Old Four, I've been looking for you for a long time." Duanyu's lips curled into a wicked smile. He sent out a burst of mystic energy from his fingers, which hit that man's knee like a storm. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.